how funny you think a couple thousand volts are.
Static Shock 2000. Season explored. Static Shock was one of the noteworthy superhero animated series of the early 2000s, and it was the first to feature an African-American superhero as the titular character. Produced by Warner Brothers, this animated show from Milestone Media Comics ran for 4 years and 4 seasons. Although there were some obvious alterations to cater to a more pre-teen audience, the stories covered various social topics. This DC animated character has since appeared in other shows and stories as well, but in this video, we will explore the entire lore surrounding this particular cartoon series.
It's in a roach motel.
Season 1. Shock to the System. Episode 1, of course, introduces our MVP, Static, and those around him. It begins with Static apprehending a set of robbers who are getting away with electronic goods. Static's hoverboard is a manhole cover, which is not very charismatic, but he makes a fabulous entry, removing the metal weapons from the robbers and making a sign in the air to direct the police to the robbers. As Static looks back on how he got the powers, we get the hero origin story. This episode is based on Static issue number 2, which featured his origin story. Virgil Hawkins is an African-American teenager living in a black neighborhood with his father, Robert, and sister, Sharon. The scene shows various parts of Dakota, including the residence of Hawkins, which is an apartment in this episode, but later changes into a townhouse. Virgil has a blonde-haired best friend, Richie, and a crush on Frida Goran. But before Virgil could muster up the courage to ask her out, Francis Stone, aka F-Stop, the school douchebag, approaches Frida. Virgil runs his mouth and is about to get beaten by Francis, but he is saved by another friend, Wade. On his way back home, Virgil is surrounded by Francis and his gang, who give him a black eye, to say the least. They run away when they see Wade approaching. Wade asks Virgil to meet him under the bridge in half an hour, ignoring Virgil's little protest. When Virgil arrives to meet Wade, he introduces Virgil to the rest of his gang and asks Virgil to join. Wade implores that he won't always be there to save Virgil from F-Stop, and that joining the gang will give him some security. An unsure Virgil returns home and refuses to speak about his injuries with his family. Richie calls Virgil and reminds him how a gang fire took away Virgil's mother's life, and Virgil agrees that he is not very keen on joining the gang. However, Wade calls Virgil at the same time and asks him to meet at the dock. Upon arriving at the dock, Wade shows Virgil that Francis and his gang have also entered the lot. Wade hands Virgil a gun and leaves to confront the other gang, but Virgil throws the gun in the water. A fight ensues between the gangs, and the police appear in their helicopters. A misfire from the confrontation hits large canisters with danger signs and releases a purple gas that engulfs all the gang members. Referred to as Big Bang from here onward, this incident is based on the 1985 police bombing of a black radical organisation, MOVE, that resulted in the death of 11 people. Virgil also escapes as every person coughs and reacts weirdly to the gas. The following day, Virgil wakes up with his newfound power of static electricity. He immediately calls Richie and asks him to meet at a junkyard. Virgil shows off his powers to impress Richie, and later, at Virgil's house, they go through a series of costumes that may suit Virgil's new crime-fighting hobby. Interestingly, one of the costumes Virgil tried is a reminiscence of Black Vulcan from Super Friends. Black Vulcan is not only another black superhero with similar powers, but is also once voiced by Static's voice actor, Phil Lamar. Soon after, we find Virgil at the warehouse, where he has just stopped a robbery. As the police step in, Static drops the rogues from the ceiling. Static finds that the stolen items are new computers for his school in Dakota, so he delivers them to the school personally while making a grand entrance through the place where the students are preparing the gym for the homecoming dance. Static helps with the preparations and even flirts with Frida before leaving, while Richie watches in wonder. If you think this plot and Virgil's constant banter are very Spider-Man-ish, you are right to believe so, as the archetype has been the source of the comics. As Virgil rejoices at his superhero status, we see some gang members mutating uncontrollably in the hospital, and the care staff looking helplessly. Francis also starts burning up, and breaks free of his bed restraints as fire engulfs his body without burning him. He breaks out of the hospital with a blast and enters the street with a menacing smile.
Girls, come and get 'em!
Aftershock. This aptly titled episode shows us the aftermath of the Big Bang explosion. News reports cover the robbery in the warehouse and label Static as a mutant superhero, although Virgil insists on calling himself a metahuman. The report further covers the birth of Bang babies, or the individuals mutated by the explosion. The report states around 100 other people were affected by the explosion. Soon enough, Virgil, Richie, and Frida come across another Bang baby who converts into a purple werewolf and sends people screaming. While running from the monster, Virgil runs into Francis. Francis scares away the werewolf with his firepower, revealing himself as another Bang baby. Although the entire series is based on Virgil encountering several villainous Bang babies, it's surprising that his friend Wade never makes another appearance throughout the show, which leaves us to wonder if he escaped from the explosion altogether or did not make it. After scaring away the werewolf, Hotstreak corners Virgil into an alley. Hotstreak throws a ball of fire at Virgil and leaves satisfied. But when he goes after Frida, Virgil appears as Static and rebukes him. As the two metahumans fight, Frida finds a payphone to call the fire brigade. Static loses the fight, but luckily, a group of firefighters hoses down Hotstreak, allowing Static to escape. During dinner, Sharon shares her support for Static, but Virgil's father shares his concerns about the Bang babies being mostly criminals and wonders if Static may also turn out the same. The next day, Virgil compares his own blood sample with Richie's in his panic. As they appear the same, he goes to the doctor for a checkup and requests a blood test. Later, Robert Hawkins questions the city council about their measures to address the Bang babies issue. However, Richie and Virgil senses a cover-up. They follow the mayor into the park and eavesdrop on her conversation with a wealthy businessman called Edwin Alva. Realizing Alva is the man behind the mysterious chemical explosion, Static follows him. Static's costume in this animated series differs from that in the comics. In the series, he wears a white mask, a white t-shirt with a lightning bolt emblem, and a purple coat with a yellow underside and yellow goggles. While in the comics, he wears a blue leotard with yellow wrist gauntlets, a yellow jacket, and a baseball cap. Static's look and attire are also slightly based on James Brown's Fitz. Dressed as Static, Virgil places a transmitter in the car and listens to Alva ordering his right-hand man, York, to save and delete some files before the mayor launches an investigation. Static breaks into Alva's company building and finds the lab, where York has just finished backing up the data. Although Static snatches the hard drive, York attacks him with a laser gun and finally confines Static inside a transparent tube. Static is unable to break the tube, and gas from underneath fills the tube, suffocating him. However, with some scientific deduction, Static charges up the gas to build the air pressure, eventually breaking the tube. Static escapes from the lab and goes past Alva, who appears calm and contemplative. Elsewhere in a hospital, Hotstreak is confined to a room and forced to take pills. However, Hotstreak is only pretending to be sick and escapes the place. The next day, Virgil and Richie discuss the disc but find Hotstreak creating a menace in the town square. Despite losing to Hotstreak once, Virgil again suits up to handle the situation. These parts of the episode are taken from Static issue number 1 and number 2. As the second round of the fight ensues, we see Static power up for the first time with a bit of heroic flair and intensity. However, the brawl exhausts both Hotstreak and Static as they end up in a natural clearing. Hotstreak comments that he intentionally brought Static where there is no metal to charge up, but Static retorts that since they are still in the city, there is always metal somewhere. Static lifts up a sewage pipeline from underground and douses Francis with garbage water, putting out his flames and knocking him out. However, the fight has destroyed the hard disk with evidence, and later, Virgil can be seen lamenting about it. But his mood lifts when Dr. Harris calls to inform him that all his tests are normal, except for his electrolytes, which is not very shocking for a teenage kid. The Breed. The story starts with Virgil, Frida and Richie watching the school track team perform in the field, with Frida covering the event as part of the school's journalism club. All the girls, along with Frida, gushes over the star athlete Derek Barnett, who in turn seeks Virgil's help with algebra. Later that evening, Derek visits Virgil's home to get tutoring and shares some flirtatious glances with Sharon. Derek suddenly experiences cramps and makes an excuse to leave Virgil's house. As Derek gets on the bus to return home, his cramps worsen, and he takes on a monstrous shape, which scares away all the passengers and the driver. He also accidentally shoots a ball of energy that breaks the bus windows. As the police car approaches, another accidental shot of energy topples the car, which hits a fire hydrant. Static appears at the scene and prevents further disaster, whereas Derek runs through alleys and gets abducted by another individual who has the ability to mingle with the shadows. The Shadow Man identifies himself as Eben and introduces his gang of bang babies called the Meta Breed. The group consists of a bird-like woman called Talon and a man called Shiv, who can create weapons from energy. A few days later, Richie shows Virgil his new invention, the Static Saucer, so he doesn't have to find more trash can or sewer covers to commute. They discuss that Derek has been missing for a few days, and Static goes on his usual patrolling. Static gets attacked by Talon and Shiv, and eventually gets abducted by Eben, who introduces his teammates, including Derek, aka Destruct, to Static. The animated version of Destruct is a bit different from the comics. In the comics, Destruct is Damon Briggs and a member of the Paris Blood Gang. The appearance of Destruct is also like that of a volcano in the comics, which has a more hardened outer crust. Eben asks Static to join his team, but Static is unwilling to do so. Talon gets furious and rebukes him, but Eben uses a calm and threatening approach to convince Static. While Static constantly refuses, he is shocked to realise that Derek is Destruct. Virgil and Richie pay Derek's mother a visit, who reports Derek being AWOL for 4 days. Meanwhile, Destruct tries to turn back to his human form, but succeeds only momentarily. Eben appears before him and takes him to raid the Dakota Sportsman store. As the Meta Breed breaks into the store, Static arrives to stop them. Static also tries to convince Derek to return, but he is too ashamed of his monstrous appearance to go back. Eben orders Derek to shoot at Static, and he does so. Thinking that Static is dead, the group escapes with the loot. Static and Richie try to find Meta Breed's hideout through a computer, and discover it to be located in an abandoned subway station called Milestone Saint, which is a tribute to the production house of the comics. Another station called Cowan Saint could be a homage to the Static's co-creator, Dennis Cowan. Destruct appears visibly sad about killing Static, and when Static sneaks into their coven, he is quite surprised. Static finally convinces Derek to return to his mother, and when the other Meta Breeds attack Static, Destruct fights back. The story of this episode is loosely based on Static issue number 12, when Destruct was forced to fight Static when his father was kidnapped by the Paris Blood Gang. In the series, only his mother is featured. Static tries to escape with Derek by charging a train bogie, but the Meta Breed follows them. Static and Destruct get rid of them, and Eben is defeated with a blast of light, quite ironically. After Derek and his mum reunite in the hospital, Derek volunteers to be a guinea pig for the research on bang babies, which is absolutely necessary since the bang babies just keep on coming. Grounded. The quirkiest part of this series is its weirdest and widest range of supervillains or bang babies. The episode starts with Carmen Dillo, a bang baby with the appearance of an armadillo, scaring away a couple so that he can steal their food. Static goes after Carmen, who runs towards a construction site, and both tumble down on a pit. However, as the ground beneath them shakes, a giant amoeba-like creature emerges, catching Carmen by the leg. Static shocks the amoeba, who then slides away into the ground. Static leaves with Carmen tied to a rope. In school, Virgil and Richie work on a walkie-talkie when Frida comes to them, ranting about her annoyance with the school's unfair funding and mismanagement. Virgil jokes about going on a strike, which gives Frida some ideas. Later, they run into the janitor, Mr. Janus, cleaning up in front of the lockers. Static and Richie test their new invention, the shock boxes, when Static finds the amoeba monster causing a menace at the Dakota Meat Packing Company. As Static engages with the monster, a part of its tendril gets cut. When the amoeba goes underground, its severed tendrils rush back to it, and Static manages to catch at least one tendril for examination. This mindless creature appears quite funny, yet it's a shame that the series has not used its ability to multiply appropriately. Virgil and Richie decide to test the severed tendril in the school lab, and secretly sneak into the school after hours, unaware that the amoeba is following them. They run into Mr. Janus, and then into Frida and her friends, who have also sneaked in to publish the school paper with an all-out editorial on the unfair budget cuts of the journalism club. Virgil and Richie examine the tendril to find that it's an ordinary germ mutated by the Big Bang explosion. However, it gets messier when the sample escapes and the journalism club members get accidentally locked in by Mr. Janus. Virgil climbs the air vent to go after the sample tendril, but lands up in the room with Frida and her friends. In the air vent, Virgil gets scared by a cluster of spiders, which is quite ironic. Meanwhile, the amoeba monster emerges through the school field and terrorizes the cheer group members. Richie watches the developments and goes to rescue his friends. Richie runs into Mr. Janus on the way, but before Mr. Janus can report him, the amoeba monster appears, terrorizing Mr. Janus away. The character of Richie Foley is a combination of multiple characters from the comics. For instance, in the series, Richie knew about Virgil being static, while in the comics, Virgil's best friend Rick Stone never knew about it, but Virgil's other friend Frida was aware of his superhero identity. Richie arrives at the newspaper room and helps the students to escape, thanks to Virgil's secret trick, but they soon come face to face with the monster. As all the students escape from the monster, Virgil notices that the monster has a weird reaction to the disinfectants used by Mr. Janus. Virgil escapes into a room and dons his static costume to save his classmates from the monster. He also uses a wet mop and a bucket of disinfectant to fend off the monster, which tries to escape and flee into the city. However, Static is quick to taunt it so that it comes back, and he rains down 2 canisters of disinfectants upon the amoeba monster. This finally kills it, but the media hails the journalism club members who take the opportunity to publicise their cause. Virgil and Richie opt to stay out of fame and publicity since, laying low is kind of a part of a superhero's duty.
Stay out of this.
They're playing my song. It is time to introduce another well-known static villain, the Rubber Band Man. The story begins with Rubber Band Man confronting a record company executive for stealing his song. The executive blames Ice Pack, the singer, for the theft, and Rubber Band Man backs off only to follow Ice Pack's limo. Virgil and Richie have been hanging out in an abandoned gas station, which, according to Richie, could serve as their headquarters. They witness Rubber Band Man chasing the limo, and Static follows. Rubber Band Man uses various ways to bounce and follow the limo, which is funny and witty. Static saves the car from toppling over, and while he starts to talk it out with Rubber Band Man, Ice Pack's driver tries to escape. Static tries to stop Rubber Band Man from hurting Ice Pack, but his powers don't work on Rubber. Rubber Band Man doesn't have any beef with Static, so he leaves Static unscathed. As per Dwayne McDuffie, this episode contains a lot of milestone Easter eggs, and one such example is Virgil calling the gas station an abandoned gas station of solitude, which is a reference to Superman's fortress. Another remark about Clark Kent having a day job was again cut due to the show still not being confirmed to be a part of DCAU in the first season. At his home, Sharon calls Virgil by his full name, Virgil Albert Hawkins, though it appears Virgil is not very keen on speaking aloud his middle name. This could be because his middle name in the original comics is Ovid. Virgil's ego gets a second shock when Robert forces Virgil to work in the fast food joint Burgerful. This restaurant is again a spoof for McDonald's and Burger King. As Virgil is made to wear a jester hat while serving, his friends tease him. The group waits for the launch of Ice Pack's music, and when Frida plays it, one of the customers gets mad and walks out of the restaurant only to change into Rubber Band Man. He shapeshifts as a woman to confront Ice Pack during his CD signing event. Rubber Band Man abducts Ice Pack and takes him on top of a tower, accusing him of plagiarism. However, Ice Pack confesses that he only raps the lyrics and blames his producer, DJ Rock, as the real thief. Rubber Band Man leaves Ice Pack on the tower to see if the claim is true. The incident has now got media attention, as Frida comes running in to inform Virgil of the same. Virgil rescues Ice Pack, but realizes that the song is really stolen, so he questions Ice Pack once again. Rubber Band Man appears at DJ Rock's mansion and identifies himself as Adam Evans. The producer lures Adam into an airtight vault and locks him there. Rubber Band Man's character has undergone a drastic change in the series, as he is not only posing as an African American, but his name is also a tribute to creators Adam Blaustein and Yves Fazani. Contrarily, in the comics, Rubber Band Man is a small-time thug named Craymon Stringer. While Adam futilely attempts to escape from the vault, Static finally arrives at the mansion in Dakota Hills. Static rescues Adam from the vault, but Adam starts throttling DJ Rock. Static now has to save the producer from Rubber Band Man, and it seems Static is having difficulty keeping everybody safe from each other. Static takes the producer to a nearby children's playground with Rubber Band following their suit. Static again tries to reason with Adam, but he doesn't listen, so Static superglues Rubber Band Man to the carousel. Ultimately, both DJ Rock and Rubber Band Man get arrested by the police, but the musical villains believe it will give them street cred. After all the humanitarian work, Virgil returns to learn that he has been fired and his father is looking for him. The New Kid. The 6th episode opens with Virgil and Richie working their hands in a cooking class when Virgil gets called to the principal's office. Virgil gets scared of being reprimanded for something as his father is also in the office. But it turns out Virgil has been accepted by the Van Moore Institute for a 6-week seminar. The institute is renowned for being a school for elite and gifted students. Virgil has some initial difficulty navigating the place and even gets tricked by 2 senior students, Specs and Trapper. He finally finds the lab where he meets his 3 classmates, Daisy Watkins and the twins Duncan and Henry. Virgil is further shocked to learn that senior students such as Specs and Trapper will take the classes. The title of this episode was also used for the DVD release containing the first 6 episodes. It was named Static Shock, The New Kid, but oddly enough, the intro sequence and theme were replaced with the Season 2 sequence and theme in the DVD. Later, while hanging out at the abandoned gas station, Static comes across a giant robot that causes some destruction on the street. Static tries to fight the robot, but eventually the robot gets away. It is revealed that while Trapper was wearing the robot suit, Spec was monitoring the activities remotely from the lab. Unaware of his senior's involvement, Static goes back to class the next day at Van Moore, and the seniors ask them to build an electronic eye for tracking. This is quite ironic, as the villains are asking Static to build the very same instrument that could trap him. Spec and Trapper get called by Edwin Alva, who orders the senior boys to capture Static alive so that Alva's bioresearch scientists can examine him. After Virgil completes the program, the seniors copy it into their disk. When Virgil and Daisy prepare to go home, they watch Edwin Alva pass by in his car. Daisy informs Virgil that Alva is the one who funds the institute, which worries Virgil. Virgil makes several excuses to go back and find the seniors, but Daisy tags along. They find the seniors' lab empty. Spec and Trapper also notice Virgil and Daisy and send the new Alva machine to catch them. As Virgil and Daisy split up while running, Virgil comes back as Static and heroically saves Daisy from the machine. He drops her at the bus stop, but Daisy encounters the twins and takes them back to the school. Meanwhile, Static is being chased by the Alva machine. The music in such chase portions and action sequences is really groovy, just like the theme song playing during the opening sequence as Static fights several Bang Babies. It gets interesting when Static breaks into Alva's home before Spec and Trapper can inform Alva where they are heading. As Spec and Trapper watch from their lab, Static grabs Alva and hovers over the pool. Alva urges Spec and Trapper not to shoot, but Spec takes charge and aims the robot's gun at Static. However, before anybody is hurt, Daisy and the twins cut one of the wires in the lab, which deactivates the robot, which now falls into Alva's pool. Static also throws Alva into the pool and leaves. Virgil returns to his school and is glad to find that Daisy has joined Dakota High. He ditches Richie to show her around the school, and we can sense some budding romantic feelings. Child's Play. Our theme for this episode is a child with magical powers creating a nuisance for adults. It begins with a preacher thinking that the apocalypse is near when the fountain water in front of Freeman Community Center runs pink. Virgil has been trying to convince his father to increase his allowance money, and they go outside after hearing the preacher. Virgil tastes the water and discovers it's actually cherry soda, while a little boy looks at it suspiciously. In school, Virgil, Richie, and Daisy discuss some of the recent extraordinary incidents one of which involves snow turning into vanilla ice cream. Doesn't all this sound just like our childhood imaginations and dreams? Virgil notices their old classmate Aaron back from the reform school and tries to talk with him, but Aaron gives him a cold shoulder. Back at the Freeman Community Center, some young boys are playing basketball when Dwayne McCall, the little boy from earlier, tells them that a video game character, Dreadbot 3000, is the best basketball player. The older boys laugh at this, and an upset Dwayne goes outside, turning a street dog into the same video game character. This community center is named after Augustus Freeman, another milestone media black superhero called Icon. The Dreadbot 3000 gets inside the basketball court and destroys it while it dribbles with the ball. The other kids run away, and Robert evacuates the building when Virgil and Richie arrive at the place. Virgil powers up as Static and attempts to fight Dreadbot 3000, while Aaron also comes to pick up his stepbrother Dwayne. As Aaron shows more interest in watching the fight than playing video games with Dwayne, it upsets Dwayne, and he changes the robot back into the dog. On their way back home, Aaron regrets missing the Big Bang, but Dwayne excitedly shares how the gas looked. Aaron also catches Dwayne conjuring a hot dog and realizes that Dwayne is a bang baby. Aaron suddenly pretends to be a good, caring big brother and starts cooking up foul plans to use Dwayne's power for his own needs. Virgil and Richie go through records and realize that Dwayne is their bang baby. Aaron also tries to use Dwayne to make $100 bills or a car key. As Dwayne refuses to steal or cheat, Aaron lies about the bank ripping him. Meanwhile, Virgil and Richie go to the Fenton projects to meet Dwayne's mum, Mrs. Price, who married Aaron's father. Mrs. Price informs them that Dwayne was near the Big Bang explosion. On their way, Virgil and Richie notice another fictional sumo fighter, Sumo Kiri, rampaging at a bank. Although Dwayne just wanted to scare the people with Sumo Kiri, Aaron coaxed him into breaking the vault. Static manages to stop Sumo Kiri from stealing, and it appears Sumo Kiri is just playing with Static. As Aaron hears the police sirens, he asks Dwayne to stop and get rid of Static another time. Later, Virgil tries to warn Dwayne about Aaron, but he gets mad and Virgil has to retreat. Virgil conjures a new plan to help Dwayne see the truth and invites Aaron to a party. He mentions Frida and Felix, among others, to convince Aaron to attend the party and tricks Aaron into saying that Dwayne and he are not close. Now, the character Felix mentioned by Virgil is Virgil's friend in the comics, but does not appear in the series. Before Virgil and Richie can play the recorded confession to Dwayne, Robert tells them that Aaron has taken Dwayne shopping. Once in the mall, Static finds that Dwayne has conjured a comic book character, Loco Martian, to rob the stores of clothes. Static remembers that Loco Martian is afraid of fire, and therefore, he creates fire to defeat it. This is a reference to the Martian Manhunter from the DC comics, who is also afraid of fire. Static tries to warn Dwayne of the truth, but Aaron refutes him. Static then plays the recorded audio over the speakers, and Dwayne becomes confused and angry. Dwayne sends more comic characters after Static, but with Aaron's constant pressure, Dwayne finally realizes the truth and stops the illusion. Dwayne tells Static that he will wait till he understands what's right or wrong. But when Aaron tries to stop Dwayne, Static sticks him to the wall, and soon the police arrive. As the episode ends, we wonder if beating the other Bang Babies will be this easy.
Well, I'm family. I'm always ready to take you in.
Sons of the Fathers. This is the only top-rated episode from Season 1, and if you are wondering why, it may be because the plot embarks on several moral and social issues. It begins with the Metabreed attempting to rob people from the Dakota Mall, only to be defeated by Static. It's worse for Talon, who gets imprisoned by the police while Static scores a news interview. Later, when Richie and Virgil watch the news, Sharon points out that Richie always hangs out at their house. Realizing it to be true, Virgil forces Richie to take him to his home. On the day of the sleepover, Richie seems uncomfortable with Virgil being at his house and gets worried when his dad comes back from work. Although Richie's mum appears kind and caring, his dad seems grumpy. Richie's dad, Mr. Sean Foley, rebukes the rap music during a very awkward dinner, and later, Virgil overhears Richie's dad's racist remarks. Virgil leaves Richie's house in the middle of the night, which upsets Richie, and he confronts his dad about the racism. This is a very real topic that is nicely handled in this animated series. Meanwhile, Eben and Shiv seek to change their fate and plan to get revenge against Static. The next day, Virgil discusses Richie and his dad's issues with Robert when he gets a call from Mrs. Foley asking about Richie. Realizing that Richie must have run away from home, Virgil decides to search for him. Richie roams alone in the snowy alleyways of Dakota and runs into Carmen Dillo and Chompus. He somehow escapes from the duo and gets a call from Static asking about his whereabouts. Eben follows Static and sees him conversing with Richie, but when Static leaves, asking Richie to return home, Eben abducts Richie. On the other hand, Sean Foley meets Robert Hawkins at the Freeman Community Center. The two adults argue, but Robert takes Sean to search for Richie. Robert takes Sean to the places where all the runways hide, and one of the boys gives them a bad tip, leading them to the Meta Breed's hideout. Sean confesses that he was not talking about Virgil, but Robert shares his knowledge about the bigots and racists, which has some effect on Mr. Foley. The title of this episode is a play on the phrase "sins of the fathers," which is a biblical reference to the concept of generational sins passing on to the other. The phrase reflects on the challenges faced by Richie due to his father's racism. The phrase has also once been used for an episode of The New Batman Adventures. Eben intimidates Richie, intending to threaten Static to break Talon out of prison. However, Richie acts dumb and secretly switches on the shock box as he repeatedly takes Eben's name and mentions the location. Eben realizes the little stint and breaks the shock box, but Robert and Sean hear Richie's scream. The two dads try to rescue Richie while Static also appears and easily defeats Shiv. Eben strangles Static, but Sean attacks him from the back, distracting him. Static takes the opportunity to launch new attacks on Eben. With the Meta Breeds finally defeated, Sean and Richie hug and reconcile, while Robert asks Static if his parents know where he is. Static makes a hurried escape before it gets comically awkward. The episode ends brilliantly, as Sean comes around to change his view and takes Virgil and Richie to the Comic-Con. Winds of Change. In this segment, we see a group of boys eating at Burgerful when an overweight kid called Heavy C starts eating from their plate. The boys throw food and drink at Heavy C for stealing, which makes him upset. Heavy C and the others realize he is a bang baby when a gush of wind blows from him. The name Heavy C is inspired by a real hip-hop music artist named Heavy D. The other bang baby Virgil meets Richie in the junkyard, who has developed a new device called Zap Caps that can work as explosives when charged by Static. Virgil seems uninterested in such new inventions and blows off Richie to meet with Daisy. As they work on the computer, Virgil flirts with Daisy. Richie comes and asks Virgil to go for their scheduled Static training. When Virgil refuses to go, Richie leaves angry. However, superheroes are never off duty, and soon enough, Richie calls Static to the Dakota Dunes amusement park, where Slipstream, wrecking the fun out of things. Slipstream is, of course, Heavy C, who is dressed up in spandex like a superhero but is causing nothing other than chaos. Static comes to save the day but gets distracted by Richie's constant instructions. As a result, Virgil gets knocked off the Static saucer, and when Richie rams a bus on the water slide to knock off Slipstream, it falls on Static. However, Slipstream flies away with the power of the wind. Slipstream's voice is based on Fat Albert from the series Fat Albert and the Cosby Kids, 1972. Interestingly, Fat Albert was also an overweight African-American character like Slipstream. Static emerges from the rubble but gets mad at Richie, leading to a fallout between the besties. At school, Richie and Virgil avoid working with each other, and although the two gushes over the same comics at a comic book store, Richie quickly leaves, remembering the tiff. Daisy tries to convince Virgil to end the feud, but none of the boys seems to budge. In the comic book store, Virgil notices a live news report by Shelley Sandoval, who seems to be following Slipstream on a helicopter. Slipstream attacks the helicopter, which loses its bearings, and Static appears to save it. In a fantastic sequence, Static changes the traffic signal, forcing all the vehicles to stop so that he can land the helicopter safely at the intersection. Daisy runs out of the store in search of Virgil and runs into Richie. They both watch Static save the helicopter, but unlike others, Richie doesn't clap at the feat. The next day, Daisy tries to convince Richie to join her and Virgil. She appears annoyed at the boys for arguing and confesses that although she likes Virgil, she likes it more when he is cracking jokes with Richie. When Virgil calls her up to cancel the plan for a certain wind situation, Richie is alerted as he goes back to the abandoned gas station to watch the news. Slipstream has damaged the roof of the Natural History Museum at Dakota, and although Static arrives to help, Slipstream splashes pond water at him, which causes a power blow-up and short-circuits everything. As per Dwayne McDuffie, water as a weakness of Static is quite stupid, and something he would very much like to change about the first 2 seasons. As Static walks away weakly, Slipstream follows him. In the meantime, Richie gathers the zap caps and heads to the place to help Virgil. He gets past the police, but Slipstream throws Richie into another pond while his zap caps explode on the road. Richie breaks his hand and goes over to Static's hiding place. The two make a run and hide beneath a bridge. Static takes the remaining zap caps and powers up to shock Slipstream, who has landed over the bridge. Static traps Slipstream in metal and leaves. At school, Daisy is glad to find the two best friends together, but refuses to accompany them for another run to the comic book store. Apart from the various references and relatable schemes, the bonding between Virgil and his friends or family makes good storytelling. Bent out of shape, as Virgil, Richie, and Daisy have become the new trio of friends. They are now hanging out with Sharon, waiting in line for concert tickets for a new musician called Stringer. Sharon takes Virgil and his friends inside with the help of a VIP ticket, as she has been dating Stringer recently. Before the show starts, Virgil and Richie overhear Stringer, ignoring the technician's warning of not using fireworks inside. However, as nature would have, the little fireworks show during the event led to a fire, and Static had to rescue the people from the hazard. Static gets upset at Stringer and blames him for the fire in front of Sharon. When Static tries to pull Stringer's hand, it appears rubbery, revealing him to be the Rubber Band Man. Static aims to take Rubber Band Man back to jail, which makes Stringer extremely angry, since this is the second time Static has ruined everything going for him. Stringer promises to reveal Static's secret identity and flees. The news of Stringer being Rubber Band Man goes public, and a new pair of metahumans are introduced. They are Puff and Onyx, who decide to be bounty hunters and catch Rubber Band Man for money. Meanwhile, the Hawkins home gets surrounded by press, and Robert fends off several phone calls while Sharon mops about Stringer. Virgil rants about Stringer being a bad guy, which brings Sharon to tears. While looking for Rubber Band Man, Static fails to notice him disguising himself as a dish antenna. Rubber Band Man follows Static to an alley and almost observes him open his mask, only to be discovered when a dog pees on him. Rubber Band Man still manages to put Static inside a bin and pull his mask, but before he can see Static's real face, he gets pulled by the bounty hunter Bang Babies. As already mentioned, in the comics, Rubber Band Man's original name was Stringer, and this could be a reference to that. It's quite interesting that, unlike famous DC heroes like Elongated Man and Plastic Man, who have similar superpowers, Rubber Band Man can shapeshift. Rubber Band Man escapes from Puff and Onyx, while Static makes a mask out of clothes from the dumpster and emerges from it. The Bang Babies leave Static, as they are after Rubber Band Man for the police reward. Rubber Band Man sneaks into the Hawkins apartment to meet Sharon, who convinces Stringer to surrender to the police. Sharon calls Robert for help, and Robert promises to talk with Captain Fitz to reduce Stringer's sentence. All of this is heard by Puff and Onyx, who have hijacked a news van and tapped onto the Hawkins residence telephone line. Virgil and Richie also return home at the same time. Sharon tries to hide Stringer, who first shapeshifts into a vacuum and then into an armchair. However, Virgil discovers him, and before there can be some reconciliation, Puff knocks in dressed as a police officer. Virgil recognizes her and shuts the door, but Onyx breaks the wall and tries to catch Stringer. Puff and Onyx kidnap Sharon, forcing Static and Rubber Band Man to follow. Puff appears to have the power to transmute and blow corrosive gas and knock out gas, depending on her mood. She knocks out Rubber Band Man when he tries to rescue Sharon from a rooftop. Rubber Band Man rolls under the bleachers of a nearby stadium, and even Onyx falls on him. While trying to target Static, Puff also corrodes the bleachers' wooden pillars, bringing them down on Onyx, Rubber Band Man, Static, and herself. Static and Rubber Band Man emerge unscathed and are ready to fight when they see Sharon running toward them. Their mutual love for Sharon stops the animosity as Static and Rubber Band together rescue Puff and Onyx from the rubble. Rubber Band Man, or Stringer, further proves to be reforming, as later later, Robert shares that he has been moved to a safer prison and could be out soon due to his good behaviour, so we can sure wait for some more interesting interaction between Stringer and Static Jr. This time, the scene opens at the Freeman Community Centre, which is hosting a fancy party in honour of the inauguration of the new Edwin Gymnasium facility. Robert and Sharon are dressed in formal party clothes as they wait for Virgil, while another attendee, Edwin Jr., gets shunned by his dad, Edwin Alva Sr., for performing poorly in school. The mayor and Edwin Alva inaugurate the facility with a pretentious speech, while an unintentional remark about his father's legal troubles lands Edwin Jr. in jeopardy. The same situation also arises for Virgil, who, as Static, has been fighting 3 snake-like metahumans. He arrives late for the party, earning his father's ire. We can sense a theme out here related to sons unintentionally disappointing their fathers. While Virgil cribs about his dad's unfair complaints to Richie, we find Edwin Jr. approaching his father with a device that can control the hazmat gas Edwin Sr.'s scientists have been examining. When Edwin Sr. blows off his son, Edwin Jr. secretly goes to the lab and draws the Big Bang gas stored in a canister. He calls the gas quantum vapor, which is a reference to the comic books, where the mutations to the Bang babies were caused by a liquid mutagen called the quantum juice. Edwin Jr. wears a suit filled with several bubbles containing the modified gas. Edwin Jr. explains that each of these gas bubbles will give him a new superpower each time he pops them. Soon enough, Edwin Jr. launches an attack of fireballs on an Alva Industries ship, causing it to drown. The crews on the ship take out the guns they have been smuggling and aim them at Edwin Jr. to no avail. Static arrives at the place and fails to lift the boat. Giving up, Static breaks a metal board and helps the crew reach the shore. Edwin Jr. gets upset at Static for overthrowing his plans. He takes the name Omnifarious, pops more bubbles to become super strong, and uses X-ray vision to see Static's real face. Static has also identified Omnifarious as Edwin Jr. However, they decide to keep each other's secret for the time being. Sometime later, when Edwin Jr. and his father are having dinner, York comes with news about Omnifarious causing more damage to Alva Industries. At the same time, Virgil's dad tries to talk to him, but Virgil is upset Robert doesn't believe in him. As Virgil discusses all this with Richie, he gets a call from Omnifarious about not interfering, as otherwise Edwin will reveal Static's secret identity. Static takes it upon himself to stop the rampage and breaks into Edwin Sr.'s bedroom while he is sleeping. Static informs him that Edwin Jr. is Omnifarious and asks Edwin Sr. to check the lab. Sharon also finds her father not sleeping and worrying about Virgil. She shares a little childhood secret to convince her father that Virgil is a good person and that they should trust him. It's pretty adorable to watch Sharon kiss Virgil on the cheeks as he gets annoyed, which is peak sibling behaviour. Virgil takes his father to the roof to disclose his identity, but Robert doesn't want to hear anything as he now believes in Virgil. Meanwhile, Edwin Sr. confronts his son at the lab, and when Omnifarious uses the gas to Hulk out, Edwin Sr. orders guards in flying machines to stop him. For a moment, the buff Omnifarious takes the face of his father, but it quickly changes to his normal self. Now, if this was intentional or a goof-up, we are not sure. The altercations between Omnifarious and the guards cause several explosions, which Virgil also observes from his rooftop. As several flying machines shoot after Omnifarious, Edwin Sr. tries to call them off. However, he cannot reveal Omnifarious as his son, and the guards ignore Edwin Sr. as they fire in self-defense. Static also arrives and asks Edwin Sr. to call off the firing, but as Edwin Sr. is helpless, Static rushes to save the situation. Static causes an electromagnetic pulse burst that shorts all the buildings and flying machines, causing the guards to escape in parachutes. Omnifarious comes back to confront his father and bursts all the bubbles, but the combination of several modified gases makes his mutations uncontrollable until he turns into stone. Static leaves after sharing his regret of revealing Omnifarious's identity to his father. As Edwin breaks down in sadness and shame, Omnifarious's stone eyes glow yellow. Replay. The 12th episode begins at the Dakota Mall, where a former child actor, Johnny Morrow, robs a store of its valuables. It appears he is helped by several clones of himself, indicating that he is a Bang baby. Johnny had his own TV show and even fan clubs, but when his show got cancelled, he fell from fame and became bitter as well. Virgil, Richie and Daisy have also been eating at the mall food court when they hear the mall alarm ring and watch Johnny and his clones rob several stores. Virgil makes an excuse for food poisoning so that he can come back as Static. He runs after Johnny and tries to catch him, but Johnny and his lookalikes throw Static into a store. Johnny hides inside the abandoned kids' circus place behind the mall. Static follows him and watches Johnny vanish one of the lookalikes. Realizing that Johnny is a metahuman, Static confronts him. Static also recognizes Johnny as a former star who now calls himself Replay. Johnny explains that his copies are energy clones and he mimics Static's power, which causes a power clash. To his dismay, Static finds a doppelganger of himself next to him, who escapes before a beam falls on Static, knocking him down. Johnny's character is played by famous Hollywood actor Neil Patrick Harris, known for his role in How I Met Your Mother. Coincidentally, Neil is also a former child actor who, unlike Johnny, has maintained his stardom. Richie and Daisy come out of the mall searching for Virgil when they notice Static's doppelganger flying. The doppelganger robs several ATMs of money, and when Richie and Daisy approach them, the doppelganger sticks Richie to the wall. Earlier, Johnny was envious of Static's popularity and commented that he would soon lose his fans. Well, this is a fine way Replay has managed to do that, as the doppelganger Static hands over the stolen money to Replay and his clones. The next day, Virgil wakes up with bruises, but his day worsens when he learns from his father and sister that Static has gone rogue. Virgil sees the news and goes to talk to Richie, who is also unwilling to believe him. The following day, Police Chief Barnsdale announces that the Meta-Human Capture Division would use non-lethal weapons to subdue the Bang Babies, which now, unfortunately, includes Static. The chief and reporter, Shelley Sandoval, gets a report about Static rampaging in a jewelry store. When the real Static arrives there, he is shunned by the public, and many are scared of him. The chief and his squad try to catch Static, but he escapes through the manhole, and this is the first time we see Static wearing his yellow goggles. Meanwhile, Replay rejoices at Static's fall from grace and removes the mask from the doppelganger's face, but white noise in the shape of the mask appears in its place. Replay finds the shock box inside Static's clothes and calls the real Static through it. Replay now plans something that would be personal. Despite being a doppelganger, there are some differences between the two Statics. For instance, Doppelganger Static's clothes are darker in colour, his t-shirt emblem is not proper, and he doesn't speak. The call works in favour of the real Static, who goes to Richie's house and coaxes him into helping. Richie changes the shockbox's frequency, and they hear a transmission of Replay instructing his clones and Static's doppelganger for revenge. Virgil and Richie search the internet and find that Johnny was fired from his own TV show called Johnny on the Spot. Virgil realises that Johnny is going to attack the DKT studio, which broadcasted Johnny's show and has now built a new studio. The real Static arrives at the studio and learns that Replay, his clones and doppelganger Static are already trashing the place. The security guard calls the police, while Richie also sneaks in, as a part of him still believes in Static. He finds the clone and realises that Static is telling the truth. Richie switches on the cameras from the control room so that Replay and Static's conversation is played on national TV. Replay shares his plans to destroy the studio to get revenge for replacing his show and put the blame on Static. The chief and his squad watch this and get inside to catch Johnny. Richie announces that Johnny is on TV, which momentarily brings joy to Johnny's face, but soon realises the danger and tries to flee. But this time, Static shocks the doppelganger and Replay, causing the clones and the doppelganger to vanish. As the police arrest Replay, Static bids goodbye to the chief, his reputation now restored. Static also reconciles with Richie and promises to treat him. Tantrum. So far, the series has avoided the cliched angsty stuff, but not anymore. For a fitting season finale, it is perhaps the best time to feature some deep emotional content, starting with Virgil visiting his mum Jean Hawkins' grave during her Memorial Day. Virgil shares the incident of the last few days in front of the grave. So, on a school field trip to an amusement park, Virgil, Richie and Daisy meet with Daisy's mum, and then they encounter one of their studious classmates, Thomas Kim. Richie and Virgil try to convince Thomas to join in the fun, but he refuses. Soon after a food fight, Static finds a train running on the wrong track that ends abruptly. He creates impromptu tracks so that the train lands safely on the ground. The passengers share their gratitude, and one of them comments that Static's mother would be proud of him. Later at home, Static feels uncomfortable seeing his mum's video and pictures. As per writer Christopher Simmons, This story takes place a few years after the death of Virgil's mother. It is fair to assume that Virgil is dealing with some repressed emotions regarding his mother's untimely death. He goes out to patrol and finds a Hulk-like, purple-skinned, orange-haired Bang Baby rampaging on a 5-star restaurant. Just like the Marvel superhero Incredible Hulk, the Bang Baby has a limited vocabulary and the disposition of an angry baby. Static also proves unsuccessful in subduing the Bang Baby as he appears to get madder with the attacks. The next day at school, they witness Thomas Kim get upset at Mrs. Pettibone for receiving a 99 in a 100-mark test. Sometime later that day, Virgil notices the Bang Baby approach Mrs. Pettibone at the parking lot. Static steps in to save the teacher, but he gets bruised and beaten by the hulking monster. At home, Virgil gets upset at Sharon when she asks him to give a memorial speech for their mother. Robert goes to comfort Virgil, realizing that he still might be grieving his mum's death. According to Dwayne McDuffie, he was initially against the idea of killing Gene Hawkins as he wanted to portray a non-stereotypical nuclear family as his. While as per Phil Lamar, this is his favourite episode as Static is dealing with something other than superhero stuff. Virgil informs his father that he needs time and doesn't want to talk about his mum or feelings. He gets distracted when Richie calls with evidence that Thomas is the Bang Baby. Richie tells Virgil that he has found Thomas's essay paper in the parking lot, and the next day they visit Thomas at his home. Thomas's dad appears as stuck up as Thomas, and we finally understand why Thomas was stressed about one mark. Thomas's mum asks them to go to his room, and when the boys show him his papers, Thomas gets angry, throws a tantrum, and forces them out. As Thomas looks at the mirror, we see his face changing. Back at Virgil's home, Richie forces Virgil to watch a video of toddler Virgil throwing a tantrum. However, instead of scolding or coddling him, Gene waits for Virgil to calm down. Richie realizes that the video has made Virgil emotional, but it's not really the time to be so, as the hulking Thomas, or as we may now call him Tantrum, breaks in. Virgil fends off Tantrum, allowing Richie to escape, and he dresses up as Static. He lures Tantrum to the under-renovation amusement park. Static evades all the attacks by Tantrum until he gets exhausted and turns back into Thomas. As Thomas loses consciousness, the police arrive. Virgil finishes telling the story to his mum and mentions that Thomas's parents are now aware of his condition and are taking better care of him. Robert and Sharon arrive to pick up Virgil, and later, at the church, Virgil gives a speech about his mum, indicating that he has stopped grieving. As Virgil hugs his sister and father, we bid an emotional goodbye to this season. Season 2, The Big Leagues. The second season of Static Shock begins with a bang and right into the thickest of the big leagues. It starts humbly with Ferret, a meta-human stealing from the farmer's market, when Static follows him. Static corners him in an alley, but a bunch of balloons with uncanny smiles emerge from the sewer, releasing knockout gas. As Static falls unconscious, something grabs Ferret and pulls into the sewer. Ferret is introduced to the Joker, who calls himself Uncle Jay, and his new group of meta-human cronies, Talon, Shiv, Hotstreak, and Kangor. Joker shares that he has come to Dakota to make a new gang, as his old playmates are all in jail thanks to Batman and Robin. However, when Ferret refuses to join, Joker sprays him with a laughing gas. Joker and his gang then break into a fire station to steal fire trucks, which they use to break into a bank. Static tries to stop them, and instead finds Ferret tied to a dumpster, laughing uncontrollably, and with a note saying "missing you." When Static sneaks into the hospital to check up on Ferret, he meets Batman and Robin, who have come to look for Joker. Kevin Conroy and Mark Hamill reprise their role as Batman and Joker respectively, as the story is set in the new Batman Adventures 1997 era. However, Robin is shown to be a bit older and hence voiced by Eli Marienthal. Batman sprays another gas on Ferret, which stops his maniacal laughter. The detective duo of Batman and Robin examines Ferret's clothes and shoes to find clues, and Static tags along. They find the sewer through which Ferret was abducted, but it takes them to the industrial district and a wider area to cover. In the tunnel, Static gets a call from his father to return home, which is kind of embarrassing when you are working with Batman. Nevertheless, Batman asks Static to signal him if necessary and leaves on their Batwing. The Batwing is, however, designed based on Batman the Animated Series, as storyboard artist David Klistake preferred it. Meanwhile, Joker has learned that Batman is after him, and, as he instructs his team to seize the opportunity, we see a picture of Harley Quinn on his desk. On the other hand, Kanga appears scared of Joker, especially after what he did to Ferret. The next day, Virgil meets up with Richie, who now sports a different hoodie and an earring. Virgil notices Talon scouring the sky and follows her as Static. She lures him into a tunnel, but Static doesn't enter and sends a bat signal to the sky. Batman and Robin arrive at the spot and enter the tunnel, asking Static to stay on the lookout. However, the duo gets ambushed and captured by Uncle Jay and his meta-breed kids, who tie Batman and Robin to the stolen and modified fire trucks. Kangor and Hotstreak also bring down the tunnel on Static, stopping him from following. Static still escapes the rubble and finds the Batwing. With Richie's help, Static rides the Batwing to find where Joker has taken Batman and Robin. Joker starts filming Batman and Robin as he prepares to crush them, but Static enters and helps the heroes to get free. Together, they defeat the villains with swift moves, but when Joker plans to electrocute Batman, Static holds Joker's hand instead and gives him a taste of his own medicine. From this point onwards, Dennis Cowan wanted Kids WB to become more accustomed to adult villains. He wanted to show that adult villains could also be fun and exciting. Moreover, Alan Burnett, a writer for Static Shock, also felt that this episode allowed Static to be more comfortable with night scenes. As the villains get caught by the police, we see Batman and Robin bidding goodbye to Static with a hint of promise about working with him again.
Jump?
Power play. In this segment, we see Richie playing alone in the abandoned gas station, pretending to be a superhero. He gets embarrassed and mad at Static, who has been watching him. Static jokes that even he pretends to be the Green Lantern and speaks in his voice. This refers to the fact that Phil Lamar also voices John Stewart, the Green Lantern, in Justice League 2011. As Richie leaves on his scooter, he runs into an old man in an eerie and abandoned part of the town. When Richie helps the man up, he feels certain charges in his palms. As the old man disappears into an alley, two boys laugh at Richie and vanish. Richie again meets with Virgil and tells him the story. When Virgil goes to get drinks, Richie notices a runaway truck heading towards a puppy trying to cross the street. Richie runs to save the pup and stops the truck with a newfound superpower. Virgil watches this and takes Richie to the junkyard to test the powers. Virgil jokes that Richie could be his sidekick, and Richie goes all out using his powers. However, weirdly enough, Richie runs out of power and Virgil has to save him. Richie gets upset and finds the old man who gave him powers. The two boys from earlier, Run and Jump, appeared in front of Richie and called for the old man. The old man introduces himself as Ragtag and promises to power Richie in exchange for keeping it a secret. It's pretty funny that neither Richie nor Jump and Run ever call him by that name. Static calls Richie through the shock box, but he doesn't reply, so Static connects to Foley's telephone by hot wiring. Mrs. Foley picks up and informs that Richie is supposed to be with him. Just then, Static observes an imminent accident and rushes to help. Static first stops some iron bars from falling on the people below, and then stops an overloaded crane from breaking down on them. Richie also arrives and scoops the people to safety using his magical powers. Richie then saves the two men falling from the crane, which earns him public appreciation. When Static arrives with the broken piece of the crane, the people ignore him. Static takes Richie to a rooftop to speak, and Richie declares his new superhero name, Push. Static and Richie again get into an argument, and Richie throws down Static with his powers, shocking him. Push goes back to meet Ragtag and observes him giving powers to Jump. Richie requests Ragtag to power him up, but this time, the old man asks for something more in exchange. This part of the story is used as a reference to spread awareness about drug addiction among children. The show tries not to be too preachy, and even uses the name Push as a reference to drug pushers. Ragtag has sent Push, Run and Jump to steal from a museum. Since the time Richie gained power, he could be seen wearing a jumpsuit just like Run and Jump. As Run and Jump describes the plan, Richie realizes that he has gone too far and refuses to be a part of it. However, he is challenged by Run and Jump. Richie smartly breaks the museum window, which sounds the alarm, and Static arrives to help Richie fight the other two boys. Once Run and Jump are defeated, Richie and Static confront Ragtag. The old man cunningly tries to draw Static's life force, knocking him unconscious, but this time, Richie gets rid of the villain without any superpowers. Later, At the abandoned gas station, Richie and Virgil argue about who is stronger as a superhero, but decide to solve it over a game in the arcade. After episode 1, this might be a light one, but it is still important to tie every loose end before Richie is established as Static's loyal partner. Brother-sister act. This is one of the episodes of Static Shock that focuses on the brother and sister bonding. On one hand, Virgil always complains about the food cooked by his older sister Sharon, but still cares for her. He hits it up with some Static Shock, eats it, and leaves in a hurry for patrolling. When Sharon touches the plate, her hands get burned by the heat. On the other hand, we have two bang babies, Boom and Mirage, who are a brother and sister duo. Boom convinces his little sister Mirage to rob a nightclub so that they can help their grandmother. Boom uses his chest as a speaker to get past the guard and destroy the club speakers, while Mirage conjures tigers from pictures on the walls to scare away the people. Static arrives late at the scene and discusses the issue with Chief Barnsdale when the reporters rush in. Static's interview briefly mentions Slipstream and Replay, the two meta-humans from Season 1. Static's interview is observed by Sharon and her friends when she notices that Static and Virgil use the exact phrase, Y2K. As she drives home, her car loses power, but Static runs past her, juicing it up. Sharon notices Static going the same way as her and catches Virgil closing his room window, which helps her piece the truth. The series has always been more popular than the comics, and this happened even after so many alterations to the characters and their costumes. For instance, in the comics, Static's powers look more realistic with a blue outline than the one in the series, which has a purplish outline. However, the most drastic change was perhaps the fact that Static and Sharon's mum were alive in the comics, and the focus on Robert Hawkins was only for the series. Back to our rogues. Mirage is upset with their riches to rags situation, but doesn't approve of stealing and robbing. The following day, Sharon showers an extra dose of affection on Virgil, trying to get more clues, which puzzles him. Virgil listens to the radio in his room, which announces a huge prize money for the next caller. Richie is already poised to win the sum, but Boom appears at the radio station and steals the money. Sharon also hears the news and rushes to tell Virgil, only to find his bedroom window open and the shock box lying on the bed. As Richie keeps calling Static, Sharon's suspicions are proved true. Meanwhile, near the radio station, Mirage conjures elephants to attack the police, while Boom's sudden noise knocks Static and the police, leading to a part of a building falling on Mirage. Static saves Mirage and takes her to the hospital, where she shares her worries about Boom. Static relays the news to Chief Barnsdale, but Boom breaks into the room and takes Mirage away. The character of Chief Barnsdale has also been made recurring for the series, as he is often Static's ally in crime fighting. Sharon, still trying to catch Virgil red-handed, takes him to a Destroyers game. As Virgil probes her, she says that she knows he is Static. As Richie also arrives, both the boys laugh at her, but when Virgil watches Boom and Mirage entering, he excuses himself and goes to change into Static. Static sets off the sprinklers to get his sister away and finds Boom in the arena management room, where Mirage is already angry at Boom for hurting the manager. Static snatches the money box from Boom as a reference to the popular reality TV show Jeopardy and its host, Alex Trebek. Static and Boom fight as Sharon runs to watch. Sharon publicly cheers Static by calling him Bro and Virgil. When Boom constantly attacks Static, Mirage creates a blinding light around Boom. Static manages to confine Boom in a glass box, which incapacitates him. Later, Static comes out as Virgil, but Sharon still refuses to believe him until she sees Static flying away behind the police cars. It appears that Sharon saw an illusion created by Mirage as a favour before the child services took her away. Although Sharon feels embarrassed, knowing her brother's secret identity would have been interesting.
Looks like we got in the game after all.
Static Shack. From the beginning of Season 2, Static Shock has differentiated itself and become one of the top-grossing animated series in Kids WB. One of these factors was the celebrity guest stars featured in the series. In this episode, Static stops a group of bang babies called Rough Pack from robbing a musical store and heads to the Freeman Community Centre to answer his father's emergency call. During the fight with Rough Pack, Static's robe gets torn, and Rough Pack leader Hyde asks Ferret to smell the torn piece and find Static. At the Freeman Community Centre, Virgil is happily surprised when Robert Hawkins introduces his son and daughter to the legendary NBA player Shaquille O'Neal. Shaq explains that Robert was one of the counselors of Shaq's basketball camp when he was Virgil's age. Their plans get interrupted by Shaq's overbearing secretary, Tracy Flackman, and Shaq invites them to his private dinner party. Shaquille O'Neal was a fan of the Static Shock comics when they originally came out, and this was indeed an amazing tribute. The Hawkins arrive at the hotel for the party dressed in their best formals, and to Virgil's dismay, Robert invites Richie to join. However, problems follow Virgil, as Rough Pack members Hyde, Ferret and Kangur also arrive in the hotel to find Static. Hyde makes Ferret wear a decent jacket to enter the party through the kitchen and sniff out Static. The party appears to have a large turnout thanks to Tracy, as she has invited all the prominent people of Dakota to the party. Shaq offers to play video games with Virgil and Richie, but Tracy keeps pulling him away. But when Ferret sniffs out Virgil, things turn messy. Richie and Virgil hide while Virgil drops a chandelier on the Rough Pack. As Robert and Sharon get on the elevator, Virgil and Richie also run for it. Shaq picks up the two boys and gets in. He kicks Hyde away from the elevator, while Virgil secretly electrocutes Hyde when he tries to pull the elevator cords. The five of them finally escape in Shaq's limousine. Another interesting fact about this episode is that it has also an individual promotional art piece featuring a real image of Shaquille O'Neal. Shaq decides to stay at the Hawkins residence at night as Ferret gets arrested by the police. All the news reports suggest that Rough Pack was robbing the people, but Shaq felt that Ferret was looking for something. When Tracy calls Shaq, he bluffs to her, but she arrives at the Hawkins residence the next morning. Virgil and Shaq escape from a back door, and Virgil takes Shaq to an abandoned basketball court where they try to score some hoops. Shaq shares how he balances his public and personal life, which inspires Virgil. Meanwhile, Kangur and Hyde have broken out Ferret from a police van, and the three of them arrive at the neighborhood sniffing Static. As Virgil takes Shaq inside the abandoned gym of the old community center, Shaq realizes that Virgil is Static. Virgil goes to change into Static as Shaq defends himself from the Rough Pack. According to Dwayne McDuffie, it was one of the phenomenal guest celebrity episodes in an animated series. Shaq and Static together incapacitate the ruffians, and later, when the press interviews Shaq, he keeps Static's identity a secret. The episode is quite a change of pace compared to how this season started, but we are sure it will pick up soon. Frozen Out. This is a Christmas episode, and Virgil is busy keeping track of all the responsibilities and attending several parties. Thankfully, no miscreant Bang Baby is around, and Virgil is just about to eat at Frida's Hanukkah party when there is a city-wide power outage. Virgil discusses with Richie how he needs to attend Daisy's Kwanzaa party and Omar's Ramadan feast. Another piece worth noting is that this is the first time Frida has been featured since Daisy was introduced. Coming back to more serious matters, Richie probes Virgil to use the radio waves, and they learn that an electric substation got buried in ice. Virgil heads out as Static melts the ice, draining him of all power. When he tries to juice himself up from a transformer, giant ice shards start dropping from the sky. Static somehow recharges and saves himself. While leaving, Static knocks into a homeless girl, asking for alms, but Static ignores her and leaves. The next day, Virgil visits the mall with Daisy and suddenly notices the homeless girl with blue skin. As the girl passes by a window, it starts to freeze. Realizing she is last night's Bang Baby, Virgil makes an excuse from Daisy and leaves. As Virgil goes to change into Static, the homeless girl unintentionally causes the mall to be covered in snow and ice. She gets triggered when a store staff unexpectedly touches her and tells her she doesn't belong. Static saves Daisy from falling under the Christmas tree and realizes that the homeless girl's power is out of control. He melts a long ice pillar which keeps rising. In another store, the homeless girl watches another little girl clutching her mum. It brings out the homeless girl's old memories of spending Christmas with her sick mother. The homeless girl remembers the glass angel her mother gave her and her stepfather, who appeared scary. But when the girl's mother is taken away by the ambulance, the child service agent comes to take her, and she makes a run for it, breaking the glass angel. The homeless girl cries and leaves, while Static finally emerges from the ice pillar. Later, Virgil and Richie volunteer at the Freeman Community Center for an upcoming food drive for the homeless. After Richie leaves, Virgil sees his father discussing the issues about the homeless project with Reverend Anderson. A wonderful aspect of this series is how the stories sometimes reflect on some very real and authentic issues. This episode gives a very simple and brief explanation of the homeless issues and the plight of homeless people, not to mention the perennial morality associated with the homeless girl. However, Virgil is yet to learn about the depth of the situation as he goes home to get ready for Daisy's party. Richie calls Virgil to inform them that they are stuck in the snow, and Static heads out to find that it is caused by the Bang Baby. The homeless girl calls herself Permafrost, and when Static asks her to come with him, she gets traumatized remembering the social service agent and runs away from him. Static tries to follow her with great difficulty as ice pellets and snow waves distract him. Permafrost's tracks eventually lead Static toward the Dakota City Cable Car Company repair depot, where he encounters several homeless people. One woman with 2 kids shows Static Permafrost's room, which is a beautiful rendition by Bill Proctor. In her room, Static finds a picture of Permafrost with her mum and her stepfather's picture torn off. As Static leaves with the picture, Permafrost looks at him angrily while hiding. Static shows the picture to Reverend Anderson, who recognizes her as Maureen Connor, who used to visit the church for food until the Big Bang a year ago. The Reverend also explains that when Maureen's mum died, her stepfather did not want to do anything with her, and that it's common for homeless people to have such mental health issues. The Reverend teaches Static to be more humane to homeless people. However, Static has too many things on his plate, like attending the interfaith service at the church as Virgil, and lighting the Christmas tree as Static. When Static goes to light the Christmas tree, Permafrost tries to take her revenge, but Static talks to her and eventually calms her down. Static gives Maureen her picture and shares that he knows her pain. Maureen hugs Static, and later, at the church, she agrees to get help from the homeless services. At the church, we see that Maureen's hair has turned from white to brownish, and her skin has changed from blue to pale. Later, at the service, Virgil's friends and their families could be seen serving dinner to the homeless. Virgil's shedding a tear during the Reverend's speech adds more humanity to this story. Sunspots. This episode starts with Mr. McGill teaching the students in Virgil and Richie's class about sunspots and their relation to electromagnetism. During the class, Virgil notices a fire nearby and excuses himself to get out. He goes to help the firefighters rescue the people, but an overload of power makes it difficult for him to control everything. Even Richie gets electrocuted when high-fiving Virgil. During dinner, Virgil notices a power issue at his home, which he realizes is his own doing. Virgil informs Richie of the same, and they realize that Virgil's power overload could be due to the sunspots. Virgil is again unable to attend a study session with Daisy and heads out of home to release some of the extra power. As Static finds it difficult to control the static saucer, he flies upwards to the sky and hitches a ride on the top of an airplane before landing on a junkyard. The power blowout from Static disperses the junks far away from Static. When he returns home at dawn, Virgil is drained out, but as he sleeps, all his things get magnetized and stick to him. Later, at school, Virgil assures Richie that all the extra power has been burned out. However, they are quite startled when they notice Hotstreak is back at school. Hotstreak claims to have gone through an anger management issue, but it's difficult to say how well that worked. This episode uses some new hip-hop music, which goes along with the story's pace. The TV series music director was Richard Wolfe, who also composed the opening themes for seasons 1 and 2. The music composition of this series is, therefore, a combination of hip-hop, electronica, and DMX-type vocals. However, R&B and classic hip-hop melodies were also played emotional and romantic moments, like when Daisy confronted Virgil over their missing sessions, or, in other words, their date. In class, Virgil again loses control of his powers, and the class has to leave the room. Static goes to the sea to release some of the power, but this time, he gets completely drained and falls into the sea. As a result, Virgil gets more time to concentrate on other things, like spending time with Daisy and brushing up on history. Although Virgil says he is fine with the temporary loss of power, he gets angry when he finds Hotstreak bullying a guy for lunch money. Richie prevents Virgil from fighting with Hotstreak, but a power trip makes Hotstreak burn everything in front of the school. The character of Hotstreak has been consistent with its comic book version, where he had repeated tiff with Static. However, in the comics, his name is Martin Bizmoney B. Scapone. The police arrive, but are too afraid to do anything. Virgil and Richie head to the abandoned gas station, where they collect the zap caps. Since Static can no longer hold a charge, he uses Zap C-Caps to scare away Hotstreak. Hotstreak realizes that Static has lost his strength and attacks him, forcing Static to run away from him. Hotstreak chases Static, who lands on a rooftop with a fan. Static uses it to hold the charge and break a water tank that finally subdues Hotstreak. With the Sunspots finally gone, Static gets his power back, and everything returns to normal. The only downside is Virgil forgetting his date with Daisy, Pop's girlfriend. At the beginning of this episode, we see two boys, Royce and Frankie, taking the subway train when they steal a briefcase from a suited man from Alva Industries. After school, the boys return to the alley where they stashed the stolen briefcase from Alva Industries. They find the quantum vapor in a high-density liquid form stored in vials inside the briefcase and decide to make money with it. Unfortunately, Virgil changes his static clothes from a nearby alley, and a patrol car of the police stops him. As the lady cop asks Virgil to show his backpack, he makes a distraction for the police and runs away from them. Later at home, Virgil's father forces him to clean up his room and get ready, as they will be dining with Robert's new girlfriend, Trina. Virgil hastily stashes his belongings in the cabinet and heads down to find Sharon, already annoyed by their dad's changed behaviour. Although Virgil approves the idea of their dad dating, it doesn't go his way, as Trina turns out to be the female cop who stopped Virgil previously. Robert scolds Virgil for running away from the police and grounds him. Although parents dating might be a slightly adult topic, the show has definitely amped the game this season. The series became so popular that the second season was renewed just 1 month after its debut. Also, from its debut to July 2003, it was the second most favourite show for boys aged 6 to 11. The next day, at school, Royce hides the quantum vapor case in his lockers and asks Frankie to research the notes found along with the vials. Officer Trina stops Virgil and Richie on the way home and takes Virgil out for a drink at Burgerful. Trina tells Virgil about the stolen vials of quantum vapor and how the liquids will turn into gas in a few days, causing a stronger explosion and more bang babies. However, Trina feels Virgil might be hiding something about the matter, which upsets Virgil, and he leaves. Well, if you are trying to date somebody, Trina is definitely not going the right way to woo the family. Meanwhile, at school, Frankie discovers that the vial contains the Big Bang vapor, and Royce smells it. When Frankie tries to stop Royce, a few drops fall on the dustbin. As the boys leave the computer lab, a cockroach and a spider climb the dustbin. Back at home, Virgil overhears his dad and Trina talking. Trina shares how the kids have not warmed up to her and decides to take a break. Just then, Richie calls Virgil about the bug problem at school. Static arrives at school to stop the gigantic mutated cockroach and spider with some difficulty. Back at dinner, Robert shares his disappointment with the kid and how it affected his relationship. However, Robert's dating Trina Jessup has been a good way for the characters and their stories to move forward. Royce returns to school the next day as a more muscular and stronger person, while Frankie feels concerned about the quantum vapor liquid. During the history exam, Royce starts changing into a grotesque, monster-like being. Virgil questions Frankie and confirms that the quantum vapor is in the building. Virgil switches on the fire alarm and instructs the students and teachers to escape, while he also calls Trina from the school office. He then changes into Static and finds the quantum vapor leaking from the student lockers. Static makes a metallic ball out of the lockers to stop the quantum vapor from leaking and hurls it onto space, where it explodes safely. Static then finds Royce in the school auditorium. Royce appears terrified but confused as he attacks Static when Trina and her partner arrive at the school. However, Static manages to lure Royce out of the rooms and restrains him with the help of a statue. Robert appears very proud and happy as the officers and Virgil get rewarded for their bravery. Robert and Trina reconcile as Sharon also comes around to appreciate Trina. However, Virgil remains grounded despite everything, as even superheroes need to clean up their rooms.
Well, I'm family. I'm always ready to take you in.
bad stretch. Touted as one of the top-rated episodes in Static Shock, it brings back some of the favourite villains from Static's history. It begins with Virgil and Richie hanging out in solitude at the abandoned gas station when Virgil picks up a radio broadcast of a new menace in town. The latest member of the meta breed, Aquamaria, is in a racing field trying to rob the people when Static appears to manage the situation. Aquamaria proves a difficult opponent for Static, as Talon and Shiv keep an eye on her stint. However, Rubber Band Man comes to Static's rescue and defeats Aquamaria in a spectacular feat. Rubber Band Man claims to have changed since he got jailed and served his sentence. As proof, even the police and media appreciate him. Although Virgil scoffs at this change, Sharon is elated with Adam's release. On the other hand, Eben gets furious, learning that Rubber Band Man has been the one to defeat Aquamaria. Eben's voice in this episode was slightly altered to sound like an echo and have a more monster-like quality. Rubber Band Man's popularity with the females also starts to irk Sharon and Virgil. Eben visits Adam at his home and asks him to join the Metabreed gang, which Adam refuses. Sometime later, the Metabreed gang, including Shiv, Talon and Carmen Dillo, breaks into an electronics store and starts raiding it. Static comes to stop the robbery, and Rubber Band Man follows soon. However, Rubber Band Man gets shoved into the storage room, where Eben confronts Adam for the second time. It is revealed that Eben and Adam are brothers and used to work together before the Big Bang. In the meantime, Static is surrounded by the rest of the Metabreed, but is able to defeat them together by turning Talon's sonic blasts against them. As Static rushes to capture Eben, Rubber Band Man allows his brother to escape. However, the surveillance camera records everything, which leads to people doubting Rubber Band Man once again. That night, Rubber Band Man breaks into the police precinct and attacks the police officers, helping the captured Metabreed gang to escape. The following day, police visit Adam's home to arrest him, but he escapes. Virgil and Richie come across the news of Rubber Band Man breaking into the prison, and Virgil rushes back home to relay the news to his sister. Rubber Band Man also arrives at Virgil's house to meet Sharon, and informs Virgil that he did not break into the police precinct. As Rubber Band Man leaves, Eben meets him and takes him to their hideout. However, Static also follows Rubber Band Man and secretly tags Rubber Band Man's heels with a tracer invented by Richie. An interesting fact about this series is that while Aquamaria is a milestone media comic book character, Eben's character was specifically created for the series and does not appear in the comics. Aquamaria is back with the Metabreed gang as Eben introduces his younger brother to the rest of the team. Static looks into the Metabreed aggregation at the abandoned pizza parlor, but finds a hidden suit resembling Rubber Band Man's costume. Piecing the incidents together, Static confronts the group and explains to Rubber Band Man that Eben had dressed up as Adam to free his friends. As Adam decides to go after Eben, Static is left to fight the remaining villains. Static electrifies the robot mice in the abandoned pizza parlor to capture Shiv and Talon while he electrolyzes Aquamaria. The robot mice band are designed by Mark Lewis. Eben's name is further revealed to be Ivan, and as the two brothers fight, it can be seen that their powers have significant similarities as both can stretch their bodies. This may further indicate that the Big Bang explosion may have a substantial impact on the genetic code of the people affected by it. As Adam eventually defeats Ivan, Static finally accepts Rubber Band Man as an ally. Similarly, Virgil warms up to Adam as he shows up at their house with a bouquet. However, reconciling with Sharon may prove more challenging than befriending Static. Attack of the Living Brain Puppets. The title of this episode may remind you of zombie movies, but don't worry, no zombies were hurt during this episode. The story begins with tension running high for the election of the next freshman class president, with Joey Bombora as the primary candidate. The other person is Madeline Spaulding, a stuck-up girl with too many agendas and few supporters. She almost catches Virgil changing from his static clothes and manages to get his signature. However, when the school snack machine dysfunctions, Virgil recommends Richie to stand in the elections. Richie soon gains quite the support with his agenda for better snack vending machines, which enrages Madeline. She soon succumbs to pain, and when her eyes glow, she remembers how a similar thing happened when she was near the Big Bang explosion. As an Easter egg, Madeline could be seen speaking to a homeless man about poverty during the flashback. This homeless man is none other than Ragtag from Power Play. Madeline realizes she has telepathic powers when she can hear the thoughts of the students around her, and she is also able to mind control 2 of the students. The next day, Madeline mind controls Joey during his speech, which turns him into a zombie-like person as he repeats whatever Madeline says. Madeline makes Joey withdraw from the elections, naming her the best candidate. Richie witnesses this, but before he can tell Virgil, Madeline reads his mind and learns that Virgil is static. As Richie returns to his senses, Madeline runs away, and Richie shares how she was inside his head. Virgil refuses to believe Richie, but soon witnesses a group of students circle Madeline like zombies. Richie explains to Virgil that Madeline has turned everyone into brain puppets, but can't affect Virgil due to his electromagnetic feedback. Virgil thinks about it at home and goes through Sharon's psychology books. It has previously been established that Sharon is a college student, and psychology is probably her major. However, she laughs out loud after hearing about the brain puppets. That night, Madeline arrives at Virgil's yard and threatens him in his dream. Virgil wakes up in the middle of the night to find that every citizen is turned into a zombie-like being. Even Robert and Sharon are mind-controlled by Madeline as they try to stop Virgil from leaving the house. Virgil still escapes in his pajamas and even fights Richie in the streets. However, when Virgil tries to speak to Richie, he turns and points to Virgil like Donald Sutherland's famous scream from the 1978 version of The Invasion of the Body Snatchers. Virgil shocks Richie and places him beside a dumpster in an alley. Virgil then acts like a zombie to get inside the school building. In the morning, Virgil switches on the camera before Madeline, with her obnoxious and haughty attitude, gives her speech. She gets slightly annoyed as the zombie-like audience doesn't reciprocate with enthusiasm. Static further interrupts it, threatening to expose her reality. Madeline orders the brain puppets to attack Static and get the tape as a homage to the Wizard of Oz movie. The brain puppets throw water on Static, making him lose his power, but Static manages to dry himself, only to be again caught by Richie and the football team. Ultimately, when Madeline attempts to control Static, the electromagnetic field prevents it and instead almost fries her brain, which releases everyone else from her control. Static's immunity to mind control has also been used in comics and other animated stories. Eventually, Joey wins the election, and Virgil tells Richie that Madeline has taken quite a hit and is recovering in a psych unit without any memory. Duped. As we head towards the end of Season 2, here's another musically inclined episode that stars 2 legendary musicians of the century. The scene opens with Adam visiting a music store when he witnesses a new metahuman called Replicon creating a fuss in the store. Adam turns into the Rubber Band Man to quickly apprehend the situation, while Static also arrives at the scene. Rubber Band Man recognizes Replicon as Marvin Roper, who has gained shape-shifting abilities from the Big Bang and was a failed musician. The appearance of Replicon is based on the voice actor Coolio, who is also a legendary rapper. Replicon takes the shape of a bat-like monster to escape from the store, and his shape-shifting abilities help him hide from Static and Rubber Band Man. At school, Virgil and Richie find Daisy and Frida working on a paper regarding the Backstreet Boys and tease the girls about fangirling. Virgil also tells Richie that Sharon is always playing Adam's music, so when Adam calls Virgil's house to get his CD, Virgil volunteers to deliver it. To his surprise, Virgil learns that Adam has been working with Backstreet Boy member AJ McLean. Adam asks Virgil to keep the news about AJ being in town a secret, but Virgil tells it to Richie, who again conveys it to Daisy and Frida. As the girls put the news on the school's website, the news spreads fast, and fans surround the music studio. On the other hand, Replicon had also sneaked into the D-Town Records office and learned about Adam working with AJ, which made him envious and angry. Meanwhile, AJ thinks the situation could help them with publicity and asks Adam to find a secret door to escape from the music studio without the prying eyes of the fans. AJ McLean is the second guest appearance of a celebrity voicing their animated versions in the series. However, Frida, Daisy, and some other girls find AJ and Adam leaving. As they run after AJ, Adam stops them as Rubber Band Man. AJ is eventually saved by Static, who drops AJ to the hotel room and secures an autograph for himself. More problems await AJ in the hotel room as Replicon is in his room and shapeshifts into AJ Replicon as AJ visits Lester Biggs, the record producer for D-Town Records, and informs him that Adam Evans is out of the project and he will work with Marvin Roper instead. The news frustrates Adam, who is too upset to be angry with Virgil, while Virgil insists to his friends that AJ wanted to sign with Adam. During a TV interview, Daisy and Frida notice that AJ's Chinese tattoo is on the wrong arms, as it is supposed to be, and Virgil deduces that it might be due to someone replicating a mirror image. Meanwhile, Lester Biggs finds it unbelievable that a horrible song like Marvin's would interest AJ. However, as Replicon as AJ threatens to leave the deal, Lester Biggs has to agree to produce it. Static also searches the hotel and Adam's house and does not find anybody. He then calls up Richie and shares his suspicions with him. Richie helps Static find the old record studio where Adam once worked with Marvin. It turns out Marvin has been holding AJ hostage in the abandoned studio, and now that the record deal is on the way, Marvin plans to kill AJ. Marvin, or Replicon, turns into a purple-coloured werewolf, like the one we saw in Aftershock, to devour AJ, but Static comes to the rescue. Replicon transforms into a wooden doll so that Static cannot shock him. No worries. Even real AJ has some tricks up his sleeve, as he uses Marvin's Bad song to shock him, giving Static the right opportunity to defeat the villain. As Adam finally gets his biggest break, the girls Frida and Daisy visit the boys wearing t-shirts with Adam's face on them. With Virgil and his friends getting into the groove, let's see what groovy stories await us in the last 3 episodes of this season.
Right, man. You're all upset about this now, but next week, it won't even matter.
Jimmy, yet another story that delves into a poignant issue, takes centre stage in this episode. It begins with Richie being taken on an ambulance from the community centre, and Robert Hawkins accompanies him. Richie is in pain, and Virgil wants to ride with them, but Robert stops him. Next, we see Virgil talking to a psychiatrist, Dr. Franklin, recounting the events that led to Richie's injury. However, Virgil talks about another guy called Jimmy. This is the 2nd episode after Tantrum that tells the whole story through flashback sequences. Virgil shares that Jimmy Osgood was a timid and loner boy who used to hang alone with a laptop and got bullied by Nick Connor and his friends. Virgil and Richie try to befriend Jimmy, who seems to push people away. However, when Nick broke Jimmy's mouse, Virgil and Richie arrived at his house with a replacement. Things go a little out of hand when Jimmy wants to show his dad's gun to Richie and Virgil, making Virgil freak out as his mom died due to gun violence. Jimmy later apologizes and befriends them. He developed a crush on Frida when she asked the boys for help decorating the community center for the school's Fright Night Halloween celebration. Virgil recalls Jimmy being too enthusiastic and making fascinating arrangements for the party. Things still got complicated when Jimmy overheard Frida talking to Nick and denying having any feelings for Jimmy. As Jimmy rushes out, Nick chases after him, finally stuffing him inside the locker. Although Virgil rescues him, Jimmy feels humiliated and leaves. Jimmy misses school the next day, and when Virgil's dad drops him to Jimmy's house the day after Halloween, Virgil discovers something terrifying. Virgil shows Robert and Jimmy's dad Jimmy's battle journal, and they realise that Jimmy has gone back to the community centre to threaten Nick and his cronies with the gun. Robert suggests to Jimmy's dad that Jimmy has got depression and needs counselling. The dungeon-like room with no air and light is used to further reflect on Jimmy's mental condition. Such aspects of this episode have earned Dwayne McDuffie and Alan Burnett the 2003 Humanitas Prize in Children's Animation. The students have been taking down the decorations at the community centre, and Frida had probed Nick to apologise, but he still mocks Jimmy. Jimmy brandishes the gun at Nick, but Richie tries to talk him out of it. However, a surprise attack from Nick's friends results in a misfire that hits Richie's legs. Due to certain broadcast standards and the target audience being children, no blood or real injury was shown on Richie. According to director Dave Klistek, the incident has been based on the Columbine High School massacre, which also had a notable impact on other Kids WB's programming. The accidental shot also traumatises Jimmy, and we later learn that he is getting psychological treatment at juvie. Virgil and Frida find it unfair that Jimmy is in the juvie, while Nick and his friends got out with a suspension and community service. The episode ends with Static breaking the 4th wall for the first time in the series. He speaks to the audience, raising awareness about gun violence and stating some stats on the issue. These numbers were provided by Handgun Control Org and Entertainment Industries Council Inc. As Virgil shares his anger and frustration with the situation with the psychological counsellor, it further sheds light on PTSD and mental well-being. Consequences. This episode, along with the next episode, Trouble Squared, was produced for Season 2 but aired during the broadcast of Season 3. As a result, the character designs remained the same as in Season 2 and did not get the revamping that happened since Season 3. So, to avoid confusion, we will discuss these episodes in this video. It starts with Static patrolling in the city when he starts showing off for the crowd, but accidentally crashes into Rubber Band Man. As both the heroes argue about whose side it is for patrolling, they notice people screaming at a nearby toy store. This is the first time we see Shiv working outside the Metabreed, as he raids the store for money and toys. The heroes defeat Shiv, but Static's arrogance gets on Rubber Band Man's nerves. Virgil's ego trip continues at home, annoying his friends and family. Officer Trina Jessup could also be seen with the family in this scene. When Daisy calls Virgil, he doesn't let her speak, but invites her to the movies. Meanwhile, Puff is super annoyed with Static's rise to popularity and gets information from an informant called Dante to conduct a robbery. As Daisy and Virgil enter the Dakota multiplex, Virgil notices Puff and Onyx. He makes an excuse and goes off to dress as Static. During Puff and Onyx's fight with Static, a poster is featured in the multiplex with a movie titled Giant Iron, which is a parody of Warner Bros.' animated film The Iron Giant. As Static continues to show off while fighting the metahumans, an acidic gas dart from Puff causes the roof to fall around Daisy. Daisy trips and falls due to the rubble, which lands her in the hospital and in a coma. Virgil visits a comatose Daisy, and her parents console him when he starts feeling guilty. Virgil, in his regular clothes, takes out his frustration at the junkyard, and Richie warns him that this could expose his identity. However, Virgil doesn't speak to him and returns home, where Adam is hanging out with Sharon and bashing Static. While the core message for this episode might be to keep humble, Daisy tripping and landing into a coma is a bit childish and doesn't really happen due to Static being egoistic. Nonetheless, when Trina informs Adam that Puff and Onyx are often seen in a pool hall, Virgil goes out without anyone watching. He breaks into the pool hall as Static and threatens Dante until Rubber Band Man comes and stops him. Rubber Band Man finally helps Static to cool down and see that Static's arrogance has become the root of all problems. Static and Rubber Band Man's chemistry has been one of the upsides of this series. Considering that the character of Rubber Band Man was supposed to be a one-shot villain, it was only due to the audience finding him to be most sympathetic that brought him back as an ally. On the other side, Dante rushes to tell Puff and Onyx about Static. Puff decides to use the opportunity to further lead Static in the path of ruin. Virgil again visits the comatose Daisy and pours his heart out, confessing his guilt and how he wanted to impress her. This time, Richie consoles Virgil. As Puff deliberately starts harming people, Virgil realizes she is trying to lure in Static. Virgil still confronts Puff as Static, who lures him to a condemned building. As Puff and Onyx bring down the building on Static, he still survives by cocooning himself with iron pipes. It appears that, like Virgil, his alter ego Static has also shed its arrogance and is back to saving people rather than showing off to the public. Finally, Static and Rubber Band Man catch Puff and Onyx. Daisy also wakes up from the coma and receives flowers from the Hawkins. She gets a better surprise when Static shows up in front of the hospital window and makes a flower motif for Daisy.
I could have just gone home, but no, I had to patrol a little bit longer.
Trouble Squared, due to being telecasted as the 11th episode from the 3rd season, we cannot call it a season finale, but merely the intended 13th episode for Season 2. While visiting Robert, Virgil learns that the Freeman Community Center is running low on money. Virgil then leaves for his career day field trip at the Alva Industries, and Daisy have joined them in the trip. At Alva Industries, Virgil and Daisy again run into Specs and Trapper, who boast that they are working for Edwin Alva's special research team. A suspicious Virgil comes back as Static and sneaks in, only to find that the secret research project is to revive Edwin Alva Jr., who was turned into a stone. Much to Static's glee, Specs and Trapper are only assigned to do the grunt work. Getting no support from Edwin Alva Sr., the duo starts working on their own on some battle suits, which enable Specs to fire laser beams. The next day, Virgil and Richie witness some fireworks while playing basketball at the community center. Sensing that the firework is emerging from Dakota Stadium, Static heads there but gets attacked by Spec and Trapper, who now call themselves Spectral and Speed Trap. The second season has established that Static Shock is part of the DCAU. This episode references iconic DC superhero quotations, like when Static uses Robin's line, "Holy sci-fi" from the 1960s Batman series, or when Richie reminds Static that Superman has the rights to the lines, "It's a job for." Spectral and Speed Trap defeat and catch Static with their altered sci-fi suit. Spectral's power includes using different coloured beams from the helmet to hurt Static, while Speed Trap's gauntlet can modify his speed. Sharon calls Richie, asking him to send Virgil home soon. As Richie calls Static, the idiotic villains present the kidnapped Static to Alva, who doesn't want anything to do with him. However, Static overcomes the restraints and tries to escape, with Spectral and Speed Trap on hot pursuit. The chase accidentally damages the scanner needed for reviving Edwin Alva Jr. Driven mad by Spec and Trapper's inadequacy, Alva Sr. fires them and stops them from trespassing. To exact revenge, Spec and Trapper kidnap Alva Jr.'s stone body. Alva Sr. sends his SWAT team to the docks to get back his son, only to find that it's a trap. Static also arrives at the place and saves Alva Sr. and his team, but finds it hard to believe that Alva Sr. has nothing against him. Alva Sr. pleads with Static to help him in exchange for money, and although Static refuses, he finally agrees to help Alva find his son. Static takes Richie's help to discover that Spec and Trapper are at the Van Moore school. Static, referring to the criminal duo as Tweedledum and Tweedledumber, is a triple reference to a dialogue used by Nightwing in Nightwing Annual Issue No. 1. Static fights Spectral and Speed Trap inside the school, but runs out of power. While looking for a charging source, Static finds Alva Jr.'s stone body and a time bomb beside it. Although Spectral freezes Static, he still manages to thaw himself and defeat the villains. Static uses Speed Trap's decelerator gauntlet to slow down the time bomb as he escapes with Alva Jr.'s body. Static also goes back to save the villains. Later, at his house, Virgil and his family rejoice at Spec and Trapper being sent to prison and celebrate that Alva Sr. has donated $10 million to the Freeman Community Center. Well, this certainly was Static's idea, but we are still left to wonder what will eventually happen to Edwin Alva Jr. Hard as nails. We begin somewhere in Gotham City, where a bunch of thugs are seemingly caught by Batman and are left hanging by the police. A young girl called Allie Langford watches the developments and runs away. Static goes after Allie, asking her to come home, but Allie refuses and claims she is now known as Nails. Allie grows her metallic nails and fights with Static. Soon, Static takes us on a flashback ride to Dakota, where Virgil, Richie, and other boys are playing basketball. Allie hurries past the boys and notices her makeup thinning and revealing her silver face. She remains unharmed when a backboard accidentally falls on her. Richie and Virgil rush to Allie's aid, but she ignores them and leaves tearfully. Virgil and Richie also notice that every student locker except Allie's has nasty claw marks. Daisy informs that Allie has run away from home, and later, Richie and Virgil examine the school computer Allie used. They find blueprints of Gotham City and a web address called Bang Baby Outreach with 2 other email addresses, Ceres and Thalia. In the first episode of Season 3, a costume change can be observed in Static and Daisy. There is also a new opening song by Romeo Miller, aka Lil Romeo, featuring some new villains. Coming back to the present, Allie or Nails runs away from Static but gets caught by Batman. However, she is freed by the unified attacks of Poison Ivy and Harley Quinn. The villainesses entrap Batman and Static in a growing tree and escape. Batman manages to break free from the tree and also helps Static. He then calls for the Batwing, which is now the second version of Batman the Animated Series. Later, at a hideout, Ivy introduces herself as Ceres, a reference to the goddess of harvest, while Harley is Thalia, the muse of comedy. Ivy and Harley convince Nails to join their party by offering her an expensive cure for her bang baby disorder. Meanwhile, at the Batcave, Alfred Pennyworth tends to Static's injuries. As Static sees Batman working on the computer, he asks about Robin. Batman tells Static that Robin has joined the Teen Titans, and his comment about Static meeting them soon is a call to Dwayne McDuffie's initial plan for a Static and Teen Titans crossover later in this season. However, a scheduling conflict would have meant the crossover would be telecast before the actual airing of Teen Titans, so the idea was scrapped. Moreover, when Teen Titans aired in 2003, it was not part of the DCAU community. Batman calls Static as Virgil as he hands back Static his student's ID card. Static argues with Batman that Ali is a good human being and pleads to give her a chance. Poison Ivy, Harley Quinn and Nails attack a large ferry at sea, and Nail is forced to carry large crates of gold to their airship. The plan for this episode was to use Killer Croc or Bane to recruit some bang babies, but it would have been too much like Big Leagues. Batman and a blindfolded Static also fly out of the Batcave as they intercept a bat signal from Commissioner Gordon. The Commissioner informs that Poison Ivy's seaweed is blocking federal gold transport. Back on the ship, Nail finally realizes the intensity of the situation and refuses to help Ivy and Harley anymore. Ivy agrees to end their deal and gives Nails the vial of the cure, which turns out to be nail polish. However, Batman and Static also appear on the ship and defeat Ivy and Harley. As Nails attempts to hurt Ivy and Harley, Static stops her and reminds her about the consequences of her action. Static further charms Ali and vanishes before their eye, impressing even Batman. Ali later undergoes treatment at a Dakota hospital as a part of a program funded by Wayne Industries. Virgil and Bruce Wayne also visit Ali, but as Alfred appears to usher Mr. Wayne, Virgil realizes Batman's secret identity. Gear. The second episode begins with Richie calling Virgil to their headquarters at the abandoned gas station of Solitude. Richie is going through a recent spurt of technological genius as he is inventing various gizmos. He shows off to Static a new remote-controlled surveillance robot that can climb onto the back like a backpack. He also shows zap caps that can trap metahumans like a coil. Soon, they hear a police broadcast of a metahuman breakout. As Static heads out to apprehend the situation, Richie follows with the backpack. Kangor, a big-footed metahuman, along with Talon and Shiv, has broken out Eben. While fleeing from the police, Eben runs into Richie and recognizes him as the one who often hangs out with Static. Static comes to the rescue of Richie, but Eben leaves through the sewers. The metabreed regroups at an old and abandoned juvenile detention center. Their discussions revealed that the metabreed members are old acquaintances from the juvie. Their leader, Eben, orders the metabreed to keep a tab on Richie. Eben's voice has reverted to normal this season and lost the echo used in the second season. Moreover, Eben's silhouette looks purplish than the black one shown in the previous 2 seasons. As Talon keeps an eye on Richie, we find him excelling in class and his brain working incessantly at full power. Virgil notes that Richie's sudden intelligence sprout is near crazy, and Richie can't stop blabbering. Virgil finally points out that Richie could be a late bloomer bang baby. It is explained that Richie got his powers from Virgil's clothes, which had residues of the quantum vapor. Moreover, in Aftershock, Richie and Virgil having the same blood characteristics may mean that Richie was already a bang baby. Richie aces history, but is still disappointed for not having a cooler superpower like shooting lasers through his eyes. According to Dwayne McDuffie, Richie was given some superpowers as the makers were losing plots that could show him hanging out with Static. Moreover, surveys have also shown that children loved Richie with powers. Richie and Virgil's conversation is interrupted by Talon and Eben, who abduct Virgil, thinking him to be Static. The metabreed locks Virgil in a solitary unit at the old juvenile center and watches him through a surveillance camera. Realizing he might be under scrutiny, Virgil restrains himself from using his powers. In the meantime, Richie takes on the mantle of a superhero as he gears up with the cool new gadgets. Richie even wears a helmet with a green shield as protection and has some initial difficulties getting the hang of his latest flight abilities. Richie tracks Virgil and fights the villains. Richie also changed the security footage to run a loop and brought Static's clothes so Virgil could change. The 2 best friends defeat the metabreeds and later wonder what Richie's superhero name could be. The names that Richie shared, like Hardware and Steel, are funny fourth wall breaking references to another superhero from Milestone Comics and DC Comics. The ultimate name provided to Rich is Gear, which is a node for Icon's sidekick Rocket. Interestingly, both Hardware and Steel are engineers with super smart intelligence and have also featured together at Worlds Collide. The episode ends with hopes for more impressive storylines as both Static and Gear head out together to address the new metahumans in the city.
I suggest we start.
Static in Africa. This episode takes the Hawkins family vacationing in Africa. While Robert Hawkins is too excited, his children are already tired of the continuous information dump. Virgil, sore from 23 vaccinations, finds it difficult to retrieve their luggage from the carousel and finally resorts to using his static powers to finish the task. They hail an African taxi service called the Tro Tros to reach their hotel in Ghana. The driver informs them about the capital city of Accra and the Independence Monument, as well as how the Webb Du Bois Center is the place for Pan-Africanism. This is not only the favorite episode of many staff members like Dwayne McDuffie and Larry Houston, but also featured several promotional pieces with static right in front of the Independence Monument. Similarly, Webb Du Bois is one of the favorite authors of Dwayne McDuffie, and so this episode is also a lot about paying homage. That night, Virgil sneaks out of the hotel as Static and increases the frequency of the shock box to contact Richie. In one of the poignant moments, Static shares how, in Africa, he feels like a regular kid like Richie and not just a black kid. The following morning, the Hawkins board are trained to Kumasi, but a mysterious hooded figure observes them. Dr. Anakaye, a professor of archaeology, sits with them and converses with Robert about their common history. Robert wishes to show his kids the abode of the Ashanti kings, and Anokie suggests they visit the Premph Jubilee Museum. The conversation stops when Osebo the leopard, a leopard-like person, enters the train by ripping its ceiling. Osebo tries to take away Dr. Anokie's briefcase, but the enigmatic person from earlier transforms into an African cowboy-like person called Anansi the Spider. Anansi fights with Osebo, and Virgil asks if he can do the web blast. This is a reference to the teen hero Spider-Man, who was the inspiration for creating Static. Anansi declares that he is not that kind of spider. He uses magical tricks and illusions, but Osebo orders his henchmen to demolish the train. As a result, Anansi has to stop the train while Robert, Sharon, and Virgil try to stop Osebo, but to no avail. Virgil places a tracker on Osebo as he escapes with Dr. Anokie's briefcase. Being stuck in a remote village, Virgil calls Richie to share his stories. Virgil calls Sharon the Shopper Zula as another reference to the Zulu king Shaka Zulu. The episode features Sharon wearing traditional African clothing as another homage. Virgil spots Dr. Anokie feasting on a plate of fufu, and when Virgil asks what Osebo stole, Anokie replies that it is a map of ancient Kumasi. Anokie mentions that he has found a lost palace at the bottom of Lake Volta, which is probably filled with Ashanti artifacts. Anansi also appears to regret losing track of Osebo. While fanboying, Virgil tells Anansi about the tracker and his identity as Static. Interestingly, all three African characters are from the Ashanti culture and folklore. Anansi is the trickster, Osebo is a leopard tricked and killed by Anansi, and Okomfo Ankoye is known as the co-founder of the Empire of Ashanti. Anansi and Virgil travel to where Osebo's henchmen are loading TNT. They fight Osebo and his minions, but Osebo throws dynamite, burying the heroes in rubble. Osebo leaves satisfied, but Static has used a force field as protection. The two heroes question one of the henchmen to find the Akosombo Dam tunnel, where Osebo is preparing his blowout for excavation. The heroes stop the explosions by defeating Osebo, who takes a tumultuous fall. Later, when Virgil and Sharon are packing, Robert informs them of a future government-funded expedition to uncover the Ashanti place Dr. Anokie found. Even though the episode aired in February, it was not part of a Black History Month piece of content and was rather inspired by the need to take Virgil out of Dakota for a while. As Anansi bids Virgil goodbye, the two heroes share their mutual admiration for each other. She-Bang. Virgil is back from his trip, but there is a new superhero in town who likes to call herself She-Bang. She-Bang helps Static and Gear rescue some workmen, making Static envious, while Gear thinks she might be an excellent addition to a team-up. The next day at school, Daisy and Frida introduce a new girl called Shanice Vale. Shanice appears timid at first, but shows excellent skills while bowling. Yet Virgil notices that when her parents come to pick her up, Shanice's performance flounders. The following day, Shanice informs Virgil, Daisy, and Richie that her parents are doctors, and they want her to be more academically inclined. They suddenly watch the news about Hotstreak rampaging on the school grounds. Hotstreak shares his disappointment with Space Battle Episode 9, and we can relate, as it is pretty often, that we too feel like setting everything on fire just because our favourite show was not how we expected it to be. In reality, Hotstreak's disappointment makes fun of the audience's reaction to Star Wars prequels Episode 1, The Phantom Menace, and Episode 2. Attack of the Clones, which received negative reviews. Shanice dresses up as She-Bang and helps Static and Gear defeat Hotstreak. Much to Static's chagrin, She-Bang leaves when the reporters arrive, and a sinister-looking agent comes to examine her discarded gloves afterward. Shanice's parents discover she is She-Bang and prohibit her from being a superhero, but she doesn't listen and heads out. Static finds her brooding on a rooftop during one of his patrols. She-Bang shares her problems with Static and even reveals that she is not a bang baby. Just then, several agents appear with a knockout gas. As Static faints, he sees the men leave with an unconscious Shanice without her mask. Later, Static and Gear meet Shanice's parents with the news, who tell them that Shanice is a lab experiment built out of singular chromosomes and not their biological child. Since Shanice has superhuman agility, the company sponsoring the experiment, Ashton Biotechnics, wanted to clone her, forcing the Veils to come to Dakota to hide. The character of Shanice is again uniquely created for the series and does not appear in the Milestone Media comics. While Static is talking to Shanice's parents, Gear gets an alert from Backpack and notices several agents and their scientists arrive. Static and Gear stop them and follow the agents to an airfield. The main agent, Crewcut, orders the pilot to take off as the plane flies with Shanice on board. Static powers up and flies high. This scene has been developed by Larry Houston, who wanted to add a bit of drama to Static's power-ups. Static manages to get inside the aircraft and free Shanice, which is quite inspired by Con Air 1997. Alan Burnett considers this to be the best episode in Season 3. However, we will disagree, as the crossovers and Africa-focused episodes are top tier. Static and She-Bang subdue the agent and force the pilot to fly back to Dakota. However, Shanice and her parents leave Dakota and go underground until the people after them are caught. Shanice kisses the boys on their cheeks before leaving, making them feel that having a girl on the team is not too bad.
What? You want me to pump up the volume? No problem.
The usual suspect. The story starts with Virgil starting his day looking for food, only for Sharon to ignore him as she heads off to the Freeman Community Center for an internship as a guidance counselor. Significant wardrobe changes are in galore in this season, as all the characters can be seen wearing different clothes, while Sharon's fashion has been influenced by their trip to Africa. In school, Virgil accidentally bumps into a huge and muscular guy, Marcus. Recently, out of juvie, Marcus has a rough and aggressive attitude that terrifies others. Later, Virgil and Richie get the news of a new bang baby rampaging in an auto show. They enter the auto show as Static and Gear to find the Hulk-like senseless beast trashing the area. Gear fails to control the monster with his cool new gadgets, while Static also gets blocked by the bang baby, which disappears when the fire alarm rings loudly. With such varied storylines, Static Shock Season 3 is easily the most popular among the 4 seasons and is rated the second best Saturday morning program among boys aged 6 to 11 years and those aged 9 to 14. This could partly be due to the improvement in animation, which gave the characters a more natural look. Sharon discusses Marcus's future with him, and in her unique and sassy way, she helps him understand the need to make correct choices and use his potential for good. The next day, Richie brings more information on Marcus, especially about his ex-girlfriend Tamara. When Virgil and Richie meet Tamara Lawrence, she tells them that Marcus had a nasty temper and behaved badly since the Big Bang, so she left him. Tamara then leaves with another guy driving a fancy car and complains about the noise, while Virgil notices Marcus coming out of an alley behind them. After Tamara's boyfriend drops her, the monster attacks the car and Static comes to the rescue. Assuming Marcus to be the monster, Virgil insults him publicly and in front of Tamara. However, Marcus does not change and instead runs after Static, who gets away in time. Meanwhile, Richie informs that Marcus was attending a session with Sharon and, therefore, cannot be the monster. When the monster again attacks Virgil, he realizes it is Tamara. In this scene, Virgil hides under the same bridge that Slipstream once destroyed, indicating that renovations have been done. Static confronts the monster, which now speaks in a dual tone. The dual voices of Arian Johnson as Tamara and D. Bradley Baker as the monster make it pretty terrifying. The monster agrees that she is indeed Tamara and seeks revenge on those who have upset her. Tamara confesses that she turns into a monster when angry or hungry. Static and Gear finally defeat the monster and realize the importance of not judging anyone based on their past. Writer Len Uley also reports the significance of this episode as helping Static grow as a person and be a classic example of a good human being. After the fight, the monster reverts to Tamara and is caught by the police. Virgil apologizes to Marcus for his thoughtless comments, and it seems that Sharon is way more upset with Virgil for his too many wisecracks.
Ties this.
A League of Their Own, Part 1. Like a Justice League episode, a cold opening shows Batman and Hawkgirl examining a lone piece of Brainiac inside the Watchtower in space. Flash suddenly comes bearing news about a cosmic superstring heading towards them. The Martian Manhunter initiates the shield, but it drains the Watchtower of most of its power. The piece of Brainiac takes the opportunity to infuse part of it into the Watchtower's system, whereas, to turn matters worse, the Watchtower has fallen out of orbit and is heading towards Earth on a crash course. As the Leaguers ponder how to handle the situation, Batman brings up an image of Static as their savior. This intro was pushed by story editor John Semper, and a similar cold opening was used for 2 more episodes from this season. The idea here was to confuse the audience about whether it was a Justice League episode or Static Shock. In Dakota, Static and Gear have been fighting their own demons, or rather, the new villain ensemble, Meta Men. This group is formed by Puff, Onyx, Hotstreak, and Carmandillo, who are by all means the most loser-like group of bang babies from Dakota. Still, it's a great help when the Justice League descends to help the boys. However, when Batman tells Static he needs to travel to the Watchtower, Gear insists on tagging along, and Batman agrees. The boys geek out while entering the Watchtower. Although Static is not thrilled about the idea of being used as a battery, he still does as told when Batman reminds him that the Watchtower could very well crash onto Dakota. Static stabilizes the Watchtower and is told to stop when Green Lantern John Stewart arrives. Phil Lamar voices both Static and Green Lantern in this episode. He even stated that this episode has legitimized Static Shock as a legendary superhero show. Static and Gear's stay at the Watchtower gets extended when the Justice League members get called by a distress signal. Things get rough when Brainiac takes over the Watchtower and tries to flush out Static and Gear from the space station. As their pizza flies into the space, Static tries to close the doors with random furniture. Ultimately, Gear uses Backpack to override the command and close off one of the doors. As Gear works on the Watchtower's system, Brainiac appears on the screen, relaying his plans to take over. Static quickly realizes this is a distraction, so Brainiac can take over another cleaner robot. As Static and Gear get rid of one robot, another shack-sized robot appears to attack the boys. Gear manages to send a message to the Javelin warning them about the fake distress call. As Batman takes the Javelin back, Hawkgirl and Green Lantern try to enter the Watchtower, now shielded by an apparition of Brainiac's face. Even though Corey Burton continues to voice Brainiac, the voice is slightly altered to make it sound traditionally evil for a younger target audience. Another alteration could be seen in Batman's design, which is not from the new Batman Adventures, but the Justice League version. Batman calls Static personally while jamming the frequency so Brainiac cannot eavesdrop. He instructs Static and Gear to re-drain the Watchtower to stop the Brainiac virus. As Static and Gear reach the core, the rest of the Justice League attacks the Watchtower from outside as a distraction. Gear finally plugs in the Backpack to enter the core and downloads several songs, so that Brainiac doesn't have sufficient memory space in the system to function. A defeated Brainiac promises to return as it goes out. After Static and Gear return to Earth, the Justice League appreciates the boys' fabulous work. Gear even requests a group picture with the 5 Justice League members as a keepsake, and the picture looks quite legendary with Flash's V sign. With the crisis averted, the boys pack to go home for dinner. However, let me remind you that this is the only 2-part episode in the entire series, so the episode ends on a cliffhanger with Brainiac taking over Backpack and attacking Richie at the abandoned gas station. A League of Their Own, Part 2. The story starts a few days after the events of the last episode, and Brainiac already possesses Richie. The Justice League has found an unreasonable load of downloads from the Watchtower and suspects that Brainiac has hitched a ride on Gear's Backpack. Flash volunteers to check up on Richie. Thanks to security footage from the Watchtower kitchen, the League now knows what Gear looks like. Flash finds Richie on his way to school in Dakota and asks to see the Backpack. Richie takes Flash to the abandoned gas station, where he captures Flash with the help of the Backpack. Sometime later, Static arrives at the abandoned gas station to look for Richie, and the Justice League members also arrive looking for Flash. Static calls Richie through his shock box, and Richie invites them to visit a factory. It could be seen that Richie's face has changed to look more like cyborg Vera from the 1983 movie Superman 3. As he waits, Richie assembles a giant robotic body for Brainiac. Once Static and the Justice League arrive at the factory, a Brainiac-controlled Flash meets them and puts everyone under Brainiac's control through a circuit board. However, we have already seen that it's impossible to put Virgil under mind control due to his electromagnetic power, so the circuit board on Static falls off. In one of the series' greatest moments, Static gets rid of every League member's circuit board, freeing them from Brainiac's control. The Martian further reveals that while controlled by Brainiac, he tried telepathically connecting to Richie, who repeated only one word, control. Static remembers that Cyborg Richie had also spoken the same word when he was momentarily conscious. Static gets upset with the Justice League for focusing more on stopping Brainiac than rescuing Richie. Other major leaguers like Superman and Wonder Woman are absent from this episode, as having 5 leaguers is quite consistent with the initial plan of doing a crossover with the 5 Teen Titans members: Robin, Beast Boy, Starfire, Raven and Cyborg. This is quite revolutionary since Brainiac is, first and foremost, a Superman villain. As a Brainiac skull ship emerges from the factory and starts digitizing everything, the Justice League gets on the Javelin to stop it, leaving Static alone in the middle of the road. As Gear works on the Watchtower's system, Brainiac appears on the screen, relaying his plans to take over. The Justice League enters the skull ship and finds several Brainiac robots inside the aircraft. Meanwhile, Static rummages through the abandoned gas station and finds the remote for the backpack. Static takes the remote to the skull ship, where the Leaguers are already fighting several Brainiac robots. Flash points out the control room has the main Brainiac. Brainiac reveals that Richie is inside his body, entrapped by wires. Static unleashes a bit of static shock that hits Brainiac, allowing the League to rescue Richie and overpower Brainiac. As the League defeats Brainiac, the skull ship falls into a river. Later, the Martian scans Richie and Hawkgirl scans Backpack for signs of Brainiac. Once they are satisfied, Green Lantern comments that Static could be a handful when he joins the League when he is older. This is quite iconic and might reference the fact that Green Lantern and a few other Leaguers meet a 60-year-old Static in a distant future in a Justice League Unlimited episode. The Once and Future Thing, Part 2, Time Warped. The story of the Justice League crossover ends here, but we are sure Static will have some more great adventures sooner rather than later.
Foolish humans, you are in my house now.
Showtime. After the awesome adventures with the Justice League, Static and Gear are back at doing what they do best, which is dealing with some bang babies. The episode starts with Static and Gear stopping Puff and Onyx from robbing a store in the mall. After defeating the villains, they notice a billboard advertising a new show called Heroes, with Static as the starring actor. Unaware of any such development, Static visits Bernie Rast, the film producer for the show. Brandon, the assistant, comes to Rast with a script for a show that Rast dismisses him, and when Static arrives, he convinces the superhero to be recorded for his program. Static agrees reluctantly, but enjoys the celebrity treatment he receives. Gear also joins the show, but Rast treats him like a mere sidekick. During their usual patrolling, Rast and his crew get on helicopters to shoot Static in action. Soon, the heroes find a person with Static-like powers trying to rob an ATM. Static and Gear find it challenging to stop the man, who calls himself Starburst. With Static distracted by the filming crew, Starburst easily defeats Static and Gear and leaves on a similar star-shaped hoverboard. Static's inability to defeat Starburst disappoints Rast, while Static and Gear get into an argument as Gear disapproves of the live cameras affecting their missions. Although Richie and Virgil are prominently displayed as best of friends, the character is considered to be canonically gay, which is even supported by Static's creators. This is perhaps why the pairing of Virgil and Richie is most popular. The show received a consistent 4.0 mark from February to April 2003, with the introduction of Gear, and reached 6.4 in May 2003. The fallout between Richie and Virgil doesn't affect Rast, who is more than eager to remove Gear from the production. However, Static is still unable to defeat Starburst, who does everything that Static does but only better. Static is also shown fighting Eben and beating him, and almost subdues Starburst when Static launches a full-forced attack, after amassing the power of an electric grid. However, Starburst shows unconventional powers by protecting himself with a force field and attacking back with double the power. Static gets humiliated and tangled in wires on live TV, which even makes it to the newspapers. He also has a fallout with Richie for trying to look too good for TV and not concentrating on the superhero business. The idea behind the animated series Static Shock was the brainchild of DC editor-in-chief Jeanette Kahn, who had Dwayne McDuffie as a subordinate. Kahn proposed adapting some Milestone Media comic books in 1993, and even Alan Burnett was hired to write an X-Men type series with Milestone Media heroes called The New Guard. However, ultimately, Static is the only one that worked out. The next day, Richie visits the Hawkins, and Sharon tells him Virgil is in a sour mood. The two best friends apologize and make up. As they discuss Static's humiliation, Virgil recalls that Starburst copies his every physical move. They review the footage of the last encounter and notice that Starburst's power source is a set of wires attached to his suit. Virgil and Richie realize that Starburst is not a metahuman and is only around when Static is shooting a program. So they make a plan where Static demands Rast to reshoot him while he takes on Starburst. This happened when Rast was already planning to replace Static with Rubberband Man. During the day of the shoot, Static remains confident that Starburst will appear, and we soon see the criminal break into a subway train to rob the police, transporting a briefcase of valuables. Static arrives soon and snatches the briefcase from Starburst, but drops it on a rooftop. As Starburst is about to launch his attack, Static removes and destroys his own microphone and recorder. This causes Starburst and his star hoverboard to lose all their power and crash onto the street. However, Rast is still in for more shock, as the perpetrator turns out to be his assistant Brandon. Brandon confesses to committing the crimes to get funding for his script, which Rast had never considered. As Brandon gets taken away by the police, we see Rast again forgetting about Brandon and calling someone over the phone for his next production.
I'll get you out of here.
You got to get us all out of here.
Romeo in the mix. This episode of Static Shock has a familiar opening scene with Hotstreak breaking into an automobile shop. As he prepares to run away on a stolen bike, Eben ambushes him from behind and drains all his powers. Only it turns out that the person is not Eben, but another metahuman called Leech. Leech further kidnaps Hotstreak and imprisons him in a cell next to a powerless Eben. The character and design of Leech are highly similar to the Marvel Comics character of the same name. However, Marvel's Leech is a mutant who only negates the opponent's power, unlike DC's Leech, which steals them. This episode is also well known for another guest appearance of Lil Romeo, the rapper. Lil Romeo is a kid star playing a video game when Bernie Rast pitches in the plan for contest winners Daisy and Frida to direct a music video with the star. As Lil Romeo remains uninterested, Rast promises that Static will be a part of the program and that a Static costume will be provided to the rapper. Virgil and Richie get the information about the collaboration directly from the girls and agree to participate in the show despite their inhibitions about Rast. At the shoot, Lil Romeo dresses up like Static and looks like his mini version. Static and Gear enjoy shooting with the rapper until they get a meta-human alert. They leave to find Talon trying to rob a store, but before Static and Gear catch her, Leech shows up to extract her power and kidnaps her. While leaving, Leech promises to get back for Static. As Lil Romeo gets a little too excited during the shoot, Static hands over the shock box to Lil Romeo to give him a more authentic feeling. In reality, Lil Romeo has been a fan of the show even before his guest appearance. Like all the other episodes with guest stars, this one also received another promotional piece featuring Lil Romeo and Static. Unfortunately, Leech appears on stage at the very moment and kidnaps Lil Romeo, thinking him to be Static. Leech gets furious, realizing that he has caught the wrong hero. But when Static calls through the shock box, Leech agrees to release Lil Romeo in exchange for Static. As Lil Romeo is stuck in a cell, even Hotstreak asks for his autograph. Leech asks Static to meet at an amusement park where he has tied Lil Romeo to a roller coaster. Static manages to stop the cart and save Lil Romeo, but gets abducted by Leech. When Static wakes up, he still has some residue power left, and realizes that Leech can't hold off the power for long. Stuck in the same prison hole for once, Eben wishes that Static would be able to help them. Meanwhile, Static's friends have informed the police and rescued Lil Romeo. Frida and Daisy ask Lil Romeo to remember where he was held as a prisoner. They speculate that Leech is probably keeping the metahumans captive in an old rundown studio in Dakota. Lil Romeo sends the girls to inform the police and watch Leech fly out of the studio. He sneaks into the studio and helps free the metahumans. It's no surprise when ungrateful criminal metahumans lock Lil Romeo and Static inside. When Leech comes back, he gets mad that the prisoners have escaped. He notices Static and attacks him while Lil Romeo lures Leech to an area with sprinklers. Lil Romeo quips that Leech should also be aware of Static's weakness, which is water. As the villain is defeated, Static gets back his full power. However, it doesn't go favourably for the other criminals, as they get easily caught by the police, thanks to Leech for draining them of power. Since Lil Romeo is mentioned multiple times in the series and has been the singer for the title tracks, it's one of the outstanding story arcs that's certainly entertaining for the viewers.
Need some help getting this monkey off your back, Static?
Toys in the Hood. As another epic Static Shock episode, this one brings back some well-known characters from the DC universe. It starts with Virgil's class going on a field trip with their teacher, Ms. Moore. Virgil and Richie joke about Daisy being the teacher's pet when they see a gigantic toy monkey chasing the bus. As the monkey forces the bus to stop, all the students escape, and Ms. Moore drags Daisy, who appears to be the main target of the giant toy. Static and Gear attempt to stop the toy monkey and receive unexpected aid from the very unexpected figure Superman. While Gear gets injured, Superman and Static finally destroy the toy. Superman uses his X-ray vision to examine Gear's ankle and diagnoses it as a sprain. Gear and Superman's interaction is quite iconic, and the second instance of a person playing a dual character since Gear's voice actor, Jason Marsden, has also voiced young Clark Kent in Superman, the animated series. As Superman takes their leave, Virgil and Richie wonder what Superman and a giant toy are doing in Dakota. The introduction of many Justice League characters in Static Shock has been quite game-changing in elevating its status. For instance, when DC first started distributing Milestone Media comic books, the characters were from different universes, but the crossovers led to the characters being re-established as from the same DCAU. The plot gets more intriguing when Virgil and Richie encounter Daily Planet reporter Clark Kent on the school premises, who inquires about the accident during the road trip. The interaction is comical and awkward, as the heroes remain unaware of each other's superhero identity. However, things look suspicious when Ms. Moore avoids Clark. Clark soon confronts her as Darcy Mason, the android woman companion of Superman villain Toyman. Darcy tells Clark that she has run away to Dakota to escape the clutches of Toyman, but now it appears that he has found her. Soon, giant toy clowns attack the school and try to catch Daisy, and again, Static and Superman have to team up. The toy clown disperses into several smaller toy clowns, and one of them abducts Daisy. Static confides in Superman about Daisy being abducted, whereas Superman appears more concerned about Darcy's absence. As Static takes Superman to Mrs. Moore's apartment, Superman relays all the information about Darcy and Toyman to Static. In the meantime, Toyman finally appears to Daisy and tells her his plans to use her to create a better body for Darcy. A toy oven changes a wooden doll to be an exact replica of Daisy, as Darcy's consciousness gets transferred to the doll. When Superman and Static enter the place, they are restrained by soldier-like toys made of plastic and kryptonite. While Static and Superman struggle to get free, Darcy double-crosses Toyman after getting her new body. There was also a plan to feature Icon as a cameo action figure, but it was later replaced by a generic robot. Daisy also takes the opportunity to escape. She is caught by Darcy, who tries to throw her into a chemical vat. Meanwhile, Static manages to escape the toy soldiers and rescue Superman, but when Static arrives to save Daisy, Darcy switches places and pretends to be Daisy. Superman again comes to the aid and offers to use his X-ray vision. However, it doesn't work, as Toyman was able to change each DNA, making Darcy a complete human with skeletal structures. Static then offers to create an electrical aura around the living beings to find out who the real one is. As Darcy gets singled out, she makes a run for it but starts melting. Superman also saves Toyman, who explains how he made a fail-safe solution to stop Darcy in case she betrayed him again. Even though Toyman has an antidote, he throws it into the vat. After Superman leaves, Static rejoices in meeting and working with his favourite superhero, with Daisy also hitching a ride on the Static saucer She shares the same emotion for Static.
This Nova burst should lighten you up.
I can absorb anything you throw at me.
The Parent Trap. The plot of this episode involves some visitors to the town. After Static and Gear inspect some Bigfoot-like footprints in recently robbed chemical plants, they race each other to reach the abandoned gas station. Unaware that Shebang is following them, the duo removes their mask at the headquarters. Shebang is mildly surprised to discover Static and Gear's secret identity. She joins the boys and tells them that her parents are missing. Shanice shows them a clip of a video call of her parents, which indicates they were in town and were suddenly ambushed in their hotel by a surprise visitor. As Shebang and the boys head out to search for the Veils, Static is unwilling to let Shebang participate in the mission. However, our girl is no damsel in distress as she leads the charge. The three inspect the hotel room and find the same Bigfoot-like footprint in the bathroom. Soon, they hear a police alert about a chemical plant being robbed and head there. The heroes encounter a large, rock-like and monster-like person wearing a lab coat rampaging at the facility. It appears that the heavy man's footprint is the one inspected by Static and Gear. The three heroes try to stop Heavy Man, and Shebang recognizes him. She is also surprised when she finds her parents inside large mechanical robots, helping Heavy Man steal items from the plants. Although the TV series has introduced entirely new characters like Shebang, it has been extremely popular and increased the demand for Static comics. So in 2000, the first 4 issues were re-released as a paperback titled Static Shock: Trial by Fire. A new miniseries named Static Shock: Rebirth of the Cool was also released between January and September 2001. Interestingly, this version featured Static changing into the costume used in the series. Static, Gear, and Shebang fail to stop the Heavy Man, who vanishes along with Dr. Jonathan and Dolores Vale. Back at the HQ, Shanice looks disappointed with her parents' involvement in the crime. However, when Virgil and Richie ask her about the identity of Heavy Man, she avoids them and refuses to let them catch her parents, threatening to expose their identities. The Heavy Man is revealed to be Dr. Koenig, an ex-colleague of the Veils who has been working on finding a way for living cells to absorb energy that would bypass the metabolic process. As a result, Dr. Koenig could now absorb mass from any object, the side effect being his constant hunger and absorbing mass, making him heavier and tougher. Shanice breaks into the abandoned Ashton Biotechnics lab, where her parents are working on a pressure chamber that will eliminate the problem. However, Dr. Koenig catches Shanice and shows that he has put poisoned collars in her parents to make them do his bidding. Meanwhile, Virgil and Richie have also discovered Dr. Koenig's secret and head out to catch him. Back at the lab, the procedure failed as the cure could not penetrate Dr. Koenig's skin. In a fit of anger, Dr. Koenig activates the collars to kill the Veils, but Shebang launches an attack. Static and Gear arrive at the exact moment, and while Static goes to fight Dr. Koenig, Shebang takes Gear to her parents. Gear uses his backpack robot to deactivate and open the collars on the Veils. On the other hand, anything Static throws at Dr. Koenig gets absorbed. Gear manages to save the Doctor right in the nick of time, but it looks like impending doom for Static as he gets cornered by Dr. Koenig. However, as people say, too much greed is not good for health, so Dr. Koenig's snacking has made him heavy enough that he fails to reach Static and starts falling through the building until he falls into the basement and cannot move. A mobile platform, or crawler, takes him away later. This mobile platform was specifically designed by Mark Lewis. As the episode concludes, Shebang apologizes to the boys, and Static asks Shebang to join them whenever she is in town.
You know me by another name.
I know you?
It's me, Mom.
Flashback. In this emotional episode, we are taken back to the gang riots in Dakota 5 years back that led to the loss of Virgil's mother, Jean's life. As Dakota City unveils statues of heroic rescue workers, Shelley Sandoval interviews Gene Hawkins' family members. However, Virgil is not too excited about the statue of his mother. As he misses her, he dresses up as Static and sits on a large wall clock in a building. He creates an electromagnetic projection of Jean's face when Gear finds him. Static worries that he will soon forget what his mother was like when they notice Eben chasing a young girl, and they rush to save her. Eben's renewed attack triggers the girl Nina Crocker's Bang Baby powers. Nina's eyes glow, and she covers Static and Gear in a bubble, taking them 10 minutes in the past. Static and Gear notice their past selves hanging out on the clock and take shelter to avoid any time paradox. Later, at the abandoned gas station, Nina explained that she got the powers while riding her bicycle near the Big Bang Blast. Nina adds that she was looking for Static and Gear as Eben was after her to use her power and escape the police. Later that day, Gear calls Static to meet at the park, and Eben follows Static. Gear has made Nina wear a costume with a belt connected to a VCR remote. He calls her Time Zone and explains that the VCR remote can help Nina freeze time and control her powers. Static proposes to go back 5 years on the days of the riot so that he can save his mother. Nina agrees, wishing to do good with her powers, but Eben grabs the remote. Static zaps Eben, blowing off the circuit and taking the 4 travel back amid the gang wars. The Dakota gang riot is most likely inspired by the 1992 L riots that happened 11 years before the release of this episode. In the past, Static looks for his mother and eventually spots her. He saves her from being crushed by a falling building and takes her to a rooftop. Static opens his mask, revealing himself to be Virgil, and tells her about gaining the powers. But his mother has difficulty believing him, as she has just tucked in a younger Virgil to sleep. Jean still feels super proud and shares a hug with her son. The series shows Jean Hawkins as a paramedic, and in the episode called Tantrum, she was voiced by Michelle Morgan. However, Alfred Woodard did the voice for this one. Richie calls Virgil about tracing Nina and Eben at the Alva Industries. Static heads out to join him, making his mother promise she won't leave the rooftop. However, as Jean gets a call from her colleague about some children being hurt, we can guess she won't keep her promise. Meanwhile, at Alva Industries, Eben drives a truck full of the quantum vapor canisters with Nina tied to a seat next to him. Static stops Eben when the truck crashes into the gas station, starting a fire. Gear recognizes it to be their future headquarters. Static also snatches the remote from him, handing it to Gear. However, with the remote damaged, Nina's power suddenly gets activated, taking them all to the future as Static helplessly watches Jean disembark an ambulance. Back in the future, Static rushes home, calling for his mother, while Nina decides to go back in time with the remote to prevent herself from being a bang baby. Ultimately, Gear is left alone to manage the tanker and an unconscious Eben. Virgil soon realizes he has been unable to change Jean's fate. Robert informs Virgil that Jean died from a stray bullet, and in her last moments, she said how proud she was of Virgil. Death of Jean is shown as a predestination paradox or canon event for Virgil to be Static, and hence cannot be avoided. Yet, as per McDuffie, this was only done due to Kids WB's request, as he would have preferred to overcome the stereotype and show Virgil as a regular black kid in a complete nuclear family. Nonetheless, Virgil finally gets his closure. The next day, Virgil and Richie see Nina playing with the other girls. Nina doesn't remember them, and Richie thinks that she must have stolen her bicycle to avoid becoming Time Zone. Although everything gets sorted, the aspect of time travel remains confusing to Static and us. Blast from the past. The final episode of the super popular Season 3 starts at a retirement home where Static reads a comic on soul power to its residents. One of the residents, Mr. Grant, seems overly enthusiastic about the stories, which is quite annoying to another resident, Dennis. Virgil gets tired of it and asks Sharon if he can leave, but she won't let him. Just then, a news report on several robots rampaging downtown Dakota plays on the TV, and Virgil goes to the rooftop. Before he can put on the Static mask, Mr. Grant sees him. Mr. Grant tells Virgil that he already knew he was Static, and part of it was because Mr. Grant was the superhero Soul Power from the 1960s. Soul Power reveals that he has powers similar to Static's, and insists that Static takes him to the robots, which, according to Soul Power, are created by his arch-nemesis, Professor Menace. Static reluctantly takes Soul Power to the place, but doesn't heed the older superhero's instructions. As a result, he fails miserably. Soul Power explains that since Dr. Menace is his arch-enemy, he has intentionally made his robots immune to electromagnetic powers. Dr. Menace's face appears on a black and white monitor in one of the robots' chests. Soul Power is shocked to see that Dr. Menace has not aged over the years. Dr. Menace promises not to kill Static and Soul Power as he wants them to see his victory. Back at home, Robert Hawkins is excited to tell Virgil about his favourite superhero, soul power, and even dances a little. It is when Mr. Grant appears at their house, seeking Virgil's help. Originally, the show's makers wanted Static to team up with another popular black superhero, the Black Lightning. However, Black Lightning is owned by DC Comics, who would not let the show use the character, so the entire plot was rewritten with soul power in it. Soul power teaches Static to travel on electric wires and takes him to his headquarters called Power Pad, which is inside an abandoned subway station. Soul power accesses old data and tells Static that he suspects Dr. Menace is planning to create weather machines to destroy cities. Soul power constantly calls Static Sparky, and it turns out Sparky was his teenage sidekick from the 60s. Soul Power then takes out his fabulous car, called the Soulmobile, to reach the office of Philip Rollins, who is an old friend of Soul Power. Rollins is the head of a big defense satellite firm, but he can't give access to the satellites to Soul Power as he lacks a government security clearance. Soul Power still steals the security card, and they head back to the Power Pad. Soul Power and Static find some disturbances on a hill near Dakota and head there. The place turns out to be Dr. Menace's decoy lair, and as soon as the heroes enter the building, they get captured by robotic hands. Dr. Menace drains Soul Power and Static of their power to charge the weather machine so that he can lay the city to ruins. However, Philip Rollins arrives and reveals himself to be Sparky. He uses the electric energy in his costume to help Soul Power and Static. Rollins explains that Dr. Menace had posed as a defense contractor to steal the access codes and use his satellites to change the weather. Together, they track the real hideout of Dr. Menace, which is underneath the basement of the retirement home where Mr. Grant lives. As Static and Sparky fight Dr. Menace's robots, Soul Power fights the evil genius. Richie is absent in this episode as production-wise, the events happened between A League of Their Own, Part 1 and Part 2, so Richie is possessed by Brainiac at this time. Finally, Static and Sparky powers up Soul Power so that he can defeat Dr. Menace. As Dr. Menace falls unconscious, the hologram of his younger face vanishes to reveal his aged face. It's quite a surprise that Dr. Menace is revealed to be Dennis, one of Mr. Grant's cohabitants in the retirement house. Now, it is quite fair to assume that Dr. Menace's name references the iconic character Dennis the Menace. However, Professor Menace is also a minor Wonder Woman villain character and robotics expert. Virgil is grateful to Mr. Grant for learning a lot from the aged superhero, although he makes a last request to learn Soul Power's epic dance. Season 4, Future Shock. The 4th season premiere has Static back in Gotham with a cold opening like several other crossover episodes. It begins with Static, Robin and Batman capturing a criminal called Timecode. They take Timecode's time machine to the Batcave to examine it. As the time machine gets activated, it tries to pull Batman in, and Static intervenes, which results in Static being pulled into the machine that takes him 40 years into the future. As Static lands in a future Batcave, the future Batman Terry McGinnis from Batman Beyond spots him and attacks. Fortunately, an old Bruce Wayne enters the Batcave and stops the fight. Bruce explains that Static arrived at the right time, as the Cobra Gang has captured a prominent Justice League member in retaliation for the capture of the Cobra leader. The Cobra is a secret organization of reptile-worshipping terrorists who not only dress like snakes, but have also spliced their genes with snake DNA. The Cobra want to do a prisoner exchange, but Bruce wants to rescue the captured hero before any exchange occurs. The only catch is that the Cobras have captured future Static. As you can see, this episode has elements of both the new Batman Adventures and the Batman Beyond animated series. As future Batman and Static ride on the Batmobile, Terry explains that if something happens to teenage Virgil, it might affect his future self. It is also learned that Gear is in another part of Earth, and the older Static already has a son. Terry also points out that Robin is a civilian after a slight pause, which means the events occur after Batman Beyond Return of the Joker. Upon landing, Virgil and Terry get into civilian clothes to get information from contacts. Meanwhile, the Cobra leader is taken out of the prison by a Gotham police warden and his units, and the leader rejoices at Static being captured. However, things start to go wrong as Virgil finds a contact who turns out to be a member of the criminal gang Jokers. Terry and Virgil escape from their clutches, but this has only increased Terry's anger with Virgil. Similarly, one of the guards transporting the Cobra leader turns out to be a Cobra member in disguise, and he helps the leader to escape. Static and future Batman call Bruce Wayne to update him. but Static can hardly wait for the man to think. He travels to find the abandoned gas station of Solitude, closely followed by future Batman. They enter the premises and find a retinal scanner that gives access to Static and takes them to a secret floor below. Future Static and Gear have upgraded their headquarters with technological innovation. They even find a futuristic shock box with a holographic message from Gear asking Static to meet at platform 247. Static is startled to see a pot-bellied adult Gear, and looking at the timestamp, they realise that the message is only a setup. Dwayne McDuffie has been able to introduce various references to his unpublished story about Virgil Hawkins through this episode. There is also mention of Green Lantern and Wonder Woman still being in the Justice League. The Cobra leader arrives at his lair and inhales some sort of gas to activate his snake-like powers. Static and future Batman also comes soon after, as Bruce informs that Platform 247 is an abandoned military facility. Upon entering, they find the adult Static in a stasis. Teenage Static and future Batman fight the Cobra leader as they try to free adult Static. Teenager Static charges up a knockout gas to finally defeat the Cobra leader, but as the rest of the Cobra members charge forward, Static frees his older self, who, in an extremely cool way, snaps his fingers to defeat everyone. Young Static and future Batman stare in awe. However, as all of this happens due to young Static's endeavours, Terry finally starts to respect him, but before the two Static can talk, young Static gets pulled back and his older self suggests believing in himself. In the present, Gear has fixed the time machine. As Static returns, Bruce refuses to hear about the future, but Static can't help but warn Gear to stay away from the fries. She back! If the episode title gives you any clue, we have two strong female characters back in the show. The episode starts with Virgil and Richie discussing the latest Soul Power comic book issue when they run into Madeline Spaulding, working in the comic book store. Fortunately, the girl has lost her telepathic power and doesn't remember Virgil to be Static. Unfortunately, she is as haughty as ever with a strong vendetta against Static. Seeing her classmates laugh, Madeline thinks they are making fun of her, and her anger triggers her new telekinetic powers. She breaks out Eben, Hotstreak and Talon from the Dakota Police Department's specialized cells for metahumans and launches an attack on Static and Gear. As the heroes struggle to fight, She-Bang arrives to give them a hand. However, She-Bang does more than asked for as she speaks to the media, declaring themselves the Dakota Trio. She-Bang informs that everyone involved in the Ashton projects and hunting for her is now in police custody, so she and her parents are out of the witness protection program. While Shanice's overbearing and bossy attitude becomes too much for her classmates to handle, the same happens for the meta breed under Madeline's leadership. Yet Madeline's great telekinetic power is a force to reckon with and keeps the meta breed in check. Several outfit changes are in order for our gang in Dakota. Richie's hoodie has changed colour, Daisy is wearing pink and blue, and Frida has purple-focused attire. Some production inconsistencies are also apparent, like Madeline's clothing from the flashback scene, which doesn't coincide with what she wore in Attack of the Living Brain Puppets. Soon, Madeline and the Metabreeds attack a public place and cause a meaningless rampage, which frustrates Eben. Static and Gear appear at the place without informing Shanice. They fight with the Metabreed, but She-Bang appears and disrupts Static and Gear's whole process. Madeline trips a statue to distract the heroes and leaves with the team. The scene featuring Static preventing the statue from falling onto the crowd is further used as additional footage in the intro sequence. An upset Static tells She-Bang to stay away from them, while her other friends also avoid Shanice. Not getting a clue, She-Bang goes out alone to catch the criminals, but instead gets caught by Madeline, who takes her to a junkyard. This episode marks the second time Static's powers have caused to change another metahumans. The first time it occurred was in Replay, when Replay was able to create a Static doppelganger. While being captured, She-Bang notices constant arguments and a power struggle between Madeline and Eben. Meanwhile, Shanice's mother has called all of Shanice's friends about her whereabouts, and Static and Gear have been on the lookout. Static and Gear arrive at the junkyard just after Madeline takes down Eben. Static helps She-Bang free, who fights with Talon, while Gear fights with Hotstreak as an impending thunderstorm can be observed. The Metabreed are soon defeated, and Static powers the junkyard with a positive charge, which attracts the negative charge of the thunderstorm, electrocuting Madeline. Afterward, She-Bang apologizes to Static and Gear and promises to stay away, but they won't have it, so she is asked to be a part of the team. The episode concludes with Static hearing another police alert and the three head out to resolve the issue. Out of Africa. If you think we had too little of the African storyline, don't worry, there are some more folktales to traverse. Episode 3 of Season 4 starts with Sharon volunteering for the West African exhibit at a museum in Dakota, and she again puts Virgil up to task. Before they leave, Dr. Enoke peeks at the Ashanti gold. He gets a call from a mysterious figure about handing something over and notices a silhouette of someone in the security camera. Enoke grabs a golden spider piece from the display and inserts it in Sharon's overcoat as he pushes Sharon and Virgil out of the museum. Sharon's wardrobe has been revamped and she wears pink pants and pink hair ties. Sharon gets mad at Enoke and leaves for home, but Virgil has to go back as he has left his bag in the museum. This is most opportune as Dr. Enoke is chased by a snake-like entity called Onini the Python. Onini wants the golden spider and threatens to kill Enoke. When Static arrives to save Enoke, another bug-like monster called Mamoboro attacks them. Gear also appears to help Static out, and together they save Enoke from death while the creatures escape. Onini and Mamoboro meet with their boss, Osibo, who tells them to look out for the spider. Mamoboro, the hornet, disperses into several smaller hornets to find the spider. The title of this episode is probably inspired by the book and movie named Out of Africa, or maybe simply because everything is happening in Dakota. Meanwhile, Enoke is deeply injured and taken to the hospital. Gear heads back home as he is grounded from blowing up the garage. Anansi morphs into a security guard and watches the developments from a nearby tree. He meets with Static after everyone leaves. He tells Static about the golden spider and how it is Anansi's source of power. Just like Static in Africa, characters like Onini the serpent and Mamoboro the hornet are part of West African folklore. Speaking of the spider, Sharon finally discovers it in his clothes, but when Robert comes to call her, it disappears and reappears when Robert leaves. Sharon uses the spider to clean the dishes, a car, and roadside dustbins before heading to Richie's house. She seeks his help to find out about the spider, and Richie quickly obliges. At the same time, Hornets discover Sharon possessing the spider and follow her to Richie's house. Elsewhere, Anansi also tells Static about the story of the spider who wanted to be a storyteller, but his father, Nyame, the sky god, wanted to bring him 3 evil characters. So, just like the West African folklore, the spider had brought Onini, Osibo, and Mamoboro. Momoatia the dwarf is left out of this tale as it might be slightly offending. The way Anansi tells the story is quite spectacular, with outstanding animation. The storyboard was drawn by Larry Houston, who wanted to do it proper justice. After story time, Static takes Anansi to Dr. Enoke at the hospital, while Sharon shows Richie the powers of the spider. Anansi's illusion makes Anansi look like a senior doctor and Static as his apprentice. The two speak random scientific words and act to get inside Enoke's chamber. Dr. Enoke tells them that Sharon has the spider. Meanwhile, Sharon and Richie are having fun with the spider, which gets interrupted when Osibo breaks into Richie's home and corners Sharon. As Sharon uses the spider to make trenches and cages, she fails to understand that the spider's power is to create illusions. Osibo mocks her and kidnaps her with the stone. Richie takes time to come back as Gear, so he tags Osibo's helicopter with a tracer. Gear then informs Static about the events, who has just learned that Enoke was the one who had placed the spider in Sharon's clothes. As the hornets threaten to sting Sharon, she gives the spider to Osibo, but Static, Gear, and Anansi arrive at the same time. Gear fights Onini, and Static tussles with Mamoboro, while Anansi beats Osibo. Anansi's illusion and Sharon's small help make it easy to defeat the villains. Anansi kisses Sharon's hand as he considers himself in her debt, but Sharon feels she is forgetting something. Her confusion is cleared when an outraged Robert calls and grounds her for not washing the dishes. Fallen hero. In this crossover episode, we see Jon Stewart's Green Lantern stealing a bunch of gold as police fire at him quite uselessly. The news upsets Virgil, as he is unwilling to believe that the great hero would take such a tumultuous wrong turn. To his dismay, Static and Gear run into Green Lantern, robbing several microchips. Static tries to stop him and put in some senses, but Green Lantern attacks back. Static gets humiliated by the Green Lantern's thrashing as he makes a bad fall in the dumpster. However, Green Lantern does get punched in the face by a green wall, thanks to the real Jon Stewart. The real Jon looks weak and unkempt as he hides himself in a torn long coat. This episode actually features a guest appearance by Green Lantern, since he did not have an individual animated series. So, the crossover is actually with Justice League 2001. The other evil Green Lantern reveals himself to be Sinestro, who is on a mission to ruin the Green Lantern's reputation. The two face off in a junkyard, and it is revealed that Sinestro has stolen John's lantern. Sinestro leaves John stuck under an iron cage. The news of Static's humiliation upsets Virgil, and what's more, he and Gear are again attacked by Sinestro disguised as John. The real John notices the fight and runs after them. Fake Green Lantern also takes the cue to hide, while the real one gets electrocuted by Static. Real John tries his best to make his case, but Static won't listen, and John almost falls to his knees begging. He gets arrested by the police, and while John is being transported, Sinestro appears to mock him. Sinestro confesses that he wants to add the power ring as a keepsake, but has to leave when he can't find the power ring on John. Virgil finds the power ring in his Static costume and realizes that John had placed it there. Static again meets with the real John, who explains how Sinestro disguised himself as a distressed astronaut to steal his lantern. Static helps John to escape the bars, but as they arrive at the abandoned gas station, Static hears Gear's muffled voice. Static finds Gear restrained by Sinestro, who blackmails Static to give the power ring. But Static hands Sinestro a ring that says Captain Dwayne's decoder ring, which is a collector's item. Speaking of collector's items, the lack of sufficient associated merchandising products and the inability to secure a toy deal is why the show got cancelled after the 4th season. Because, with all these amazing crossovers and extensive plots, there is no way the series was cancelled for low ratings. In truth, Season 4 of Static Shock was only surpassed by Pokemon. Back to our crossover, Jon Stewart arrives at the spot, and Sinestro again morphs into John. Static goes to help Gear while John fights Sinestro. Thanks to Static, John has been able to power up, although Sinestro tries to distract the heroes by putting the public in danger. Static and Gear are ready to save the people and help John get payback. Static continuously charges John, helping him defeat Sinestro. Sinestro's disguise finally gets revealed to the public, and John has his powers and reputation back. John takes the Green Lantern's oath before leaving with Sinestro tied with wires. As Static's faith and respect for the Emerald Knight is restored, Gear reminds him that Green Lantern may also feel the same about Static. Army of Darkness. It is a dark, sinister night in Dakota, and one lonesome superhero, Static, is on his nightly patrol when he finds a young girl wearing sunglasses standing in front of a jewelry store. The alarm rings, and another boy and girl come out of the shop with their loot. Surprisingly, they are also wearing sunglasses. The boy, called Fade, phases through the wall, while the tall and dark woman, called Brickhouse, easily gets rid of any of the poles that Static used to confine her. As a tribute to Static's producer, Swinton O. Scott III, the pole had a plate called Swinton Street. Fade and Brickhouse seek the help of the smaller girl, Nightingale, who creates a dark shadow that traps Static in darkness. When the shadow clears up, Static finds that the rogues have gone. The kids meet with Eben inside a subway station and deliver the stolen diamonds and microchips to him. The kids have yellow eyes and are sensitive to light, so naturally, they wear sunglasses when out in the streets. Eben leads the group deeper into the station, where they meet another member, Tech. Tech uses the diamonds to create dark matter from a machine, which Nightingale otherwise produces in small proportions. John Semper Jr. states this episode features the most number of pre-existing Milestone Media characters. He also said that the story arc is based on the 1939 film They Made Me a Criminal. Meanwhile, Static is having a hard time staying awake, and Gear has finally joined him in patrolling. As they discuss how the Dark Knight keeps patrolling at night, Gear rightly guesses that he must be a rich guy who gets to sleep during the day. They get an alert about a raid in the Dakota nuclear reactor. Sure enough, the new group of metahumans are found escaping with a canister of nuclear waste. Static and Gear try to stop them, but Eben leaves them hanging over the edge on top of the nuclear reactor. Nightingale creates a distraction for Static and Gear to escape, but this earns her the ire of the team members. Nightingale tries to escape, but Eben catches her and throws her into a pit, shining bright light upon her. However, Static and Gear come to her rescue, and when the rest of the metahumans attack them, the light accidentally falls on the metahumans who run away. Nightingale mentions to Static and Gear that her name is Gale. She tells them about the origin of the Nightbreed, a different kind of bang babies, sensitive to light. The Nightbreed had regrouped to save themselves from the sun and had to steal for a living as others feared them for their eyes. Gale explains how Eben calls them the Army of Darkness. This origin story resembles the Blood Syndicate from the Milestone Media comics, although slight changes are made to some characters. For instance, in the comics, Fade is an intangible ghost unable to take human form, while Brickhouse looks like a wall. Gale also comments that Tech has become the most intelligent person in Dakota after the Big Bang, but obviously Gear would differ. Eben has tasked Tech to analyze Gale's power and create a machine that will bring perpetual darkness to Dakota. Gale, Static, and Gear stop and return to the subway to stop Eben. Eben sets up a bomb to stop the heroes, but this time, Brickhouse comes to their aid. She tells Static and Gear that Eben will place the machine at the center of Dakota. In a remarkable coincidence, this place turns out to be an abandoned gas station. Static, Gear, and the two girls arrive at the abandoned gas station and engage in a brawl with Eben, Fade, and Tech. As Eben and Tech switch on the machine, Gear tries to stop it but gets distracted, while Eben gets knocked out by a stray shot from Tech. The dark matter gets released, and Static asks Gale to contain it. Gear succeeds in stopping the machine, impressing Tech, and as the sun comes out, Static takes all the Nightbreed members back to the subway. Brickhouse repeats Gale's explanation to Fade that making Dakota dark will not work, as it will make ordinary people disappear. However, the Nightbreed decides to remain underground and solve their own problems. Tech even thinks about researching a cure. As Static and Gear leave to get their early morning sleep, they are assured that they now have friends in the dark. The episode starts with a desperate Virgil calling Frida, asking if he can hang out since Richie is quite out of the radar. As Frida has girl stuff plans with Daisy, Virgil takes a rain check. A police siren makes him go out as Static, and he finds Hotstreak speeding on a hot car. By now, it's pretty clear that Hotstreak is fascinated with speeding vehicles and stealing automobiles. Static stops Hotstreak, but before the duo can fight, they are zapped by uniformed men who abduct the boys. Static and Hotstreak wake up inside an aircraft, but to their dismay, they are attached by a single handcuff-like restraint. Static assumes he is mistakenly taken, but his conversation with the guards proves otherwise. The staff used by these guards to zap bear a striking resemblance to the weapon disintegrator shown in Superman, the animated series, 1996, in the episode Tools of the Trade, 1997. Static and Hotstreak now have to unwillingly work together to get out of the clutches of the guards. After being brought to a facility, Hotstreak and Static try to escape, but they notice an unconscious rubber band man, Talon, and Gear restrained in a chamber. Well, this explains why Richie was not picking up Virgil's calls. Since the episode started with a cold opening retelling the events of the episode Junior, we can fairly assume that Edwin Alva Sr. has something to do with the capturing of the metahumans. Despite their arguments and frequent attacks on each other, Static and Hotstreak escape into the forest. They find a jet scooter lying in the forest, which was shot down by Static earlier. Static recharges it, and the two get on it to escape the guards. Now, if you had a good time watching Hotstreak and Static team up, it becomes hilarious when Hotstreak grabs Static like a damsel in distress when Static rides the jet scooter. Hotstreak opposes Static's idea to rescue the others, but Static comments that they are on an island, so none of their powers would help them escape. Finally, they come to terms and head towards the facility, but Hotstreak has a nervous breakdown watching a nurse pass by. As they hide, Hotstreak and Static notice Edwin Alva Sr. instructing his goons and a doctor to take the metahumans to the chamber, where he will use the energy of the Bang Babies to reanimate his son, Edwin Alva Jr. Static and Hotstreak quietly sneak into the chamber, and Static steals a key from the nurse that helps him get free from the handcuffs. Hotstreak rejoices loudly, which gains the attention of the staff. Hotstreak escapes, leaving Static, who gets knocked out by the attacks. The doctor starts the machine for the energy transfer, which puts the unconscious metahumans in pain. In this episode, Rubber Band Man's costume is changed to a darker purple without a helmet. Static regains consciousness and somehow powers up as he shocks the nurse. Before we proceed, let me tell you that all this energy has so far had no impact on reanimating the statue of Alva Jr. Static helps the metahumans, and together they fight back the Alva goons. In another round of surprise, Hotstreak returns with Alva Sr. as a hostage and asks the goons balloons to stand down. Although he claims he couldn't fly the hoverjet alone, he probably liked working with Static for once. Gear notices that Alva Jr.'s vitals are falling, and Static volunteers to be the source of energy needed to reanimate him. Watching Static, even Hotstreak volunteers, and they finally bring back Alva Jr. After the father-son reunion, Alva Sr. apologizes to the metahumans and even gifts Hotstreak with a hoverjet. A more than happy Hotstreak refuses to battle it out with Static and lets him return the stolen car, while even Talon smiles to be a part of the good ones. Hoop Squad. Robert is taking Virgil and Richie to Los Angeles in a limo to watch the All-Star game from their VIP seats, thanks to Robert's fundraiser. Robert goes to the hotel to check in, while Virgil and Rich enter the All-Star Stadium for a sneak peek. They witness the legendary basketball players Karl Malone, Tracy McGrady, Yao Ming, and Steve Nash practicing in the empty court. The guest appearances are unique in this episode, as only Karl Malone voices his animated counterpart, while actors voice the others. This is quite a contradiction, as the creative team was initially against the idea of this crossover, which was forced by the WB network. However, the rare combination of these adults works fine. As Richie and Virgil share their fan moment with the basketball stars, they suddenly notice everything made of rubber dissolve. Shockingly, the team disappears too. As Richie and Virgil go out as Static and Gear, they observe several objects from the whole town dissolve. Gear's backpack picks up a signal of nanites. The duo follows it only to find a gigantic robot entirely made of nanites taking out a freight train from the tracks. Static and Gear attempt to take down the robot, but its regeneration ability stops that from happening. The duo is joined by 4 other superheroes in masks, who do a slightly better job of fighting the robot. However, the robot makes the final move of creating a silver tornado and vanishes with a captured Gear. The 4 superheroes introduce themselves as Karl Malone, the Pulverizer, Steve Nash as Point Man, Yao Ming as Center Force, and Tracy McGrady as Spin Drive. Collectively, they call themselves the Hoop Squad. As a tribute to their respective teams, the All-Stars wear their own jerseys, and their superhero suits also represent their NBA team colors. The Hoop Squad takes Static to their headquarters, where they introduce him to Mason Andrews and his robot, Lagarta, which has designed the bioenhancer suits for the basketball stars. Dr. Mason Andrews is also the liaison between the Hoop Squad and the National Biotech Authority, or NBA. Andrews and his frequently interrupting female robot tell Static about Dr. Odium, an evil nanotech expert fired from the NBA for wanting to test on humans. A video also shows Dr. Odium blackmailing the NBA to pay him $100 million in 2 hours, or he will use nanites to destroy the entire West Coast. Meanwhile, Dr. Odium brags at Gear, who accidentally drops his shock box. Dr. Odium uses it to fake Gear's voice and calls Static to a trap. Robert also calls Virgil to find out about his whereabouts, but the Hoop Squad gives an excuse, revealing that they know Static's real identity. This part of the story doesn't get the necessary explanation it deserves, so we assume Static has told them, or maybe the government already knows Static's real identity. The Hoop Squad and Static arrive at a sewer tunnel that is quickly filled with nanites trying to capture them. The group somehow escapes with the help of Static's leadership. They also learn that Odium's nanites are near an abandoned oil field, and they hurry to the place where Odium is already pumping nanites into the ground with the help of a compressor. The Hoop Squad demonstrates a wide range of tactics in this phase, especially when Dr. Odium uses the nanites to build the gigantic robot from earlier. An interesting fact from the Hoop Squad is that although the story is set in the 2004 NBA All-Star Game 2004, not all the featured players made it to the game. The scene of Static and Gear fighting the robot also makes it to the usual introductory scene of Static Shock. Static manages to reverse engineer the compressor, which destroys the nanites and Dr. Odium's giant robot. Gear also calls Static with the news that he has freed himself and found the real Dr. Odium encased in a glass case. The episode ends with Virgil and Richie finally catching the game as Mr. Hawkins looks stupefied. Now you see him. The story begins at the Dakota Mall, where Daisy is looking at a necklace she is saving for. For a moment, she catches a glimpse of someone in the mirror who suddenly disappears. This is followed by someone rushing past everyone in the mall, stealing things and dropping stuff. It's quite understandable that the latest intruder is a speedster. Static and Gear arrive at the last moment and before the person escapes, but thankfully, Gear's backpack has recorded the encounter. When Virgil gloats about receiving free B2K concert tickets from Sharon, Richie shows him a slowed-down video that has captured someone in a reddish suit running extremely fast. Virgil goes to the mall to invite Daisy to the B2K concert, as she is the biggest fan. There, they meet one of the nerdy classmates from school, Eddie Felson. The character is most likely named after Paul Newman's character, Fast Eddie Felson, from the 1961 movie named The Hustler. Daisy tells Virgil that Eddie has a crush on her and is stalking her, so when Eddie tries to ask her out, Virgil intervenes with the concert tickets and Daisy hugs Virgil. An angry Eddie walks away and decides to steal the necklace for her. When Eddie returns as the speedster to steal the necklace, Static and Gear get a heads up. They arrive at the mall and put it on lockdown. The mysterious thief finally reveals himself to the heroes and calls himself the Speed Warp. It's pretty fascinating that apart from speeding, the criminal has the ability to slow down time, which he does with the help of his gauntlet. Speed Warp uses the ability to entrap Gear in one of the binding zap caps. Speed Warp also increases Static's speed to match his own and again brings everything to a standstill, calling it hypertime. Speed Warp takes the opportunity to lift Gear's mask, identifies him as Richie, and deduces that Static must be Virgil. Speed Warp threatens Static and Gear not to interfere in his matter, and later delivers the necklace to Daisy. Speed Warp's costume and cowl are similar to other speedsters from DC Comics, such as Flash. The following day, Eddie gets a call from his boss, Dr. McDonald, who asks him to return the time gauntlet and turn himself up. McDonald's claims to have security footage of Eddie stealing the time gauntlet. Eddie goes to Dr. McDonald's office as Speed Warp and cannot find the video record. He finds that Dr. McDonald is at the airport and goes there. However, Eddie does more than steal as he loosens the screws on the aircraft and ties up the pilot, making sure that it crash. Thankfully, Static and Gear notice the airplane's dysfunction and make a heroic save, with a broken car as the only collateral. When Dr. McDonald tells them about his intern, Eddie, the police surround Eddie's house. Eddie escapes using the hypertime ability, while Gear develops a time belt using Dr. McDonald's technology for Static, which can be used only once. Virgil goes to the B2K concert with Daisy and is having a good time when Speed Warp appears and puts everything in hypertime. This sequence uses the song Pretty Young Thing from B2K's 2002 album Pandemonium. Eddie keeps Daisy at speed, and this time, he reveals his identity as the Speed Warp. Daisy runs away from the concert, and in normal time, Virgil finds her missing. As Static, he activates the time belt and finally catches up to Speed Warp chasing after Daisy. Speed Warp pulls out the belt from Static during their scuffle. The dual power of two time-stopping agents affects Speed Warp, who gets permanently stuck in time while the others come back to normal time. However, Static is still really fast in real time as he waits as Virgil for Daisy to come back, where the rubber meets the road. This episode has been hailed as one of the most important stories so far, and it informs the audience of a significant issue, but we will get onto that later. The story begins with Virgil and Richie playing video games at Adam Evans' house as he and Sharon prepare for their date. The couple leaves the house to the boys, who notice many unread fan mails addressed to Rubber Band Man or Adam. Adam has difficulty reading the menu in the restaurant as the words jumble up. At the same time, a burly metahuman breaks into the Alva Industries, which makes Edwin Alva Sr. furious. The metahuman calls himself Tarmac and enters one of the labs. He tries to take a fusion engine from the lab, and Alva tries to stop him. The news of the break-in makes headlines, and Adam watches it on his date. He rushes off to the Alva Industries, where Static and Gear also arrive. Together, they try to mock and stop Tarmac, but Tarmac seizes Alva and the machine to escape. Tarmac is another pre-existing Milestone Media comic character in Static issue number 2. His abilities and appearance further resemble Clayface and Magma from the Terrific Trio. At the final moment, he throws Alva back to the heroes, who order them to press the override button, sealing all the exits. However, Rubber Band Man again has trouble reading the labels, which causes a delay and results in Tarmac escaping. Alva is furious at Rubber Band Man as the fusion generator could wipe out the whole of Dakota. However, we are more appalled that Alva has the guts to order around the heroes and even be angry at them. Tarmac brings the fusion generators to Specs and Trapper, who makes fun of Tarmac. Tarmac is quite a dumb character, doing errands for Specs and Trapper just for a few bucks. Back at Alva's office, Alva gives the heroes 3 devices to shut down the fusion generator. Rubber Band Man goes back to his home and plays the piano when Static visits him, asking him to read a newspaper. Adam confesses that he has dyslexia and has never completed his special learning program as he felt dumb. Adam also revealed that he could not sit still in class, which is a classic example of ADHD. It is an informed storytelling, as 30% of people with dyslexia also have ADHD diagnoses, and one condition seems to exacerbate the other. However, Static is a true hero in all senses, as he boosts Adam's morale and even keeps it secret from Gear. Elsewhere in a dive bar of the Rogues, Carmen laughs at Tarmac for stealing the fusion generator for only $1,000 when Alva is offering $1 million for its return. An angry Tarmac goes back to Specs and Trapper asking for a fair share. Specs and Trapper share their plan to disrupt life in Dakota and ask for ransom, but Specs wears a sunglass that emits an optical blast. Specs' appearance and his optical blast have a striking resemblance to Cyclops from X-Men Evolution. This show also debuted in Kids WB in the fall of 2000 and ran until 2003. Trapper holds Tarmac with his specialized gloves with vines protruding from the fingertips. Specs' optical blast accidentally hits the fusion generator. Meanwhile, the heroes arrive at Westwood Flat to begin their search, but Rubber Band Man mistakenly enters a condemned building that starts to fall apart due to the tremors from the fusion generator. Static saves Rubber Band Man, but Gear gives him an earful, unaware of his condition. Together, they eventually find Specs and Trapper's hidden lab. As a fight ensues, Specs and Trapper release Tarmac, who leaves with the fusion generator. Static and Gear subdue Specs and Trapper, while Rubber Band Man follows Tarmac to the dockyard. He throws Tarmac into the water and uses the device Alva gave to shut down the fusion generator. With 1 minute left, Gear and Static also panic and go to find Rubber Band Man. Rubber Band Man uses his lessons from school to enlarge the instructions on the mobile device and read them carefully. Static and Gear arrive just after Rubber Band Man has shut it down. So, after the story is over, we get a sequence of Static and Rubber Band Man breaking the fourth wall and directly educating the audience on the importance of training for those with dyslexia. They cite examples of George Washington, Albert Einstein, and Thomas Alva Edison. The latter was also the inspiration for the character name Edwin Alva. This is because Dwayne McDuffie did not like Thomas Alva Edison, who is known to have stolen other people's ideas. As the episode ends with an awareness message, we marvel at how a children's cartoon is an outstanding way to raise awareness for a critical issue that affects thousands of American children and even worldwide. Linked. This story starts with Static and Gear fighting a new Bang Baby with chain-like tentacles coming out of his body. The Bang Baby escapes from their clutches, and Static can be hardly bothered as he has other important business, such as attending a charity football dinner. Of course, Richie joins the Hawkins at the dinner party, which is hosted by Rashid the Rocket Randall, an all-star pro football player and Robert Hawkins' friend from college. Rashid introduces an upcoming pro football player called Jewel Jones. The Bang Baby from earlier also observes the news from his room. During the dinner, Sharon calls Julie, as she knows him from her student counselling days, and Jewel offers to take Sharon, Richie and Virgil for a ride in his Hummer. On their way, they are stopped by the Bang Baby with tentacles, who calls himself Chainlink. Virgil and Richie make an excuse and come back to fight, but Chainlink drops rocks upon them. Julie escapes in his car and goes back to his high-security mansion. Chainlink trespasses into Jewel's house and reminds him of his past. Julie is revealed to be a similar Bang Baby, as tentacles protrude from him. Chainlink blackmails Jewel to share 10% of his $1 million deals to keep Jewel's identity as a Bang Baby a secret. Some common themes that have come out of Static Shock are its focus on American music and sports. Such trends also encouraged the Midway Games to announce a platform video game based on Static Shock for Game Boy Advance in May 2003. Even promotional footage of the game was displayed at the 2003 Electronic Entertainment Expo. However, as luck would have it, the game was cancelled for unknown reasons. The other person who does not want to get cancelled is Dooley, so he agrees to Chainlink's condition. Sharon, Virgil, and Richie return home with Robert when Jewel arrives, and again asks Sharon for breakfast. Before Jewel leaves, Gear places a tracker in his Hummer. The next day, Static and Gear stalk Duel while Sharon overhears Jewel talking to someone and asking them to come to a specific address. As you can probably guess, Dule has asked Chainlink to meet. Surprisingly, the place has chemical vats, and Dule plans to finish off Chainlink. As the two wrestle each other, Static and Gear come to the rescue, and so does Sharon. Static saves Sharon from falling into vat, while Sharon seems greatly disappointed in Julie. Julie's Bang Baby powers are also exposed while Chainlink escapes. Jewel recounts that he was embarrassed to let Sharon know that he was still part of a gang during the Big Bang, which caused their mutation. However, as Chainlink or Troy inhaled more of the quantum vapor, he could not control his mutations. Sharon is still upset at Julie for hiding the stuff and playing unfairly. During the charity game, Virgil, Richie, Sharon, and Robert watch from the sidelines when Jewel enters the middle of the field to address the public. He apologizes to everyone for keeping a secret, but before he can confess, Chainlink disrupts his speech and attacks him, forcing Jewel to reveal his tentacles. Richie and Virgil again run away to change and come back as the Dakota duo. It's insane how Robert and Sharon don't suspect them, even in this obvious situation. Perhaps this is why Lois didn't know Clark was Superman. Anyway, Rashid Randall and the rest of the footballers rally to help Jewel fight Chainlink, and Static eventually drops a scoreboard on the criminal. Later, Sharon shares how proud she is of Jewel, although the exposure means he will never play pro football again. Sharon also feels Virgil and Richie are cowards, but that doesn't matter as Rashid invites them to play catch, and the boys are more than eager. Wet n Wild, Hotstreak and Aquamaria are back, but what's weird is that the two might have a fling. It's difficult to comprehend since fire and water don't mix. The two decide to rob the people queuing for Pop Singer Candide's latest soundtrack CDs. Virgil and Richie are also in line keeping place for Daisy, who is a big fan, but they are disturbed when they see the infamous Bernie Rast as the record producer. They warn Candide not to work with him as he is a total sleaze. To make matters worse for Bernie, Hotstreak and Aquamaria strike the shop, and although Hotstreak gets away, Gear freezes Aquamaria with nitrogen gas. The title of this episode is quite apt, considering the two villain metahumans involved. It was also once used by Static in Bad Stretch to call Aquamaria. The name is a reference to a well-known chain of water parks called the Wet n Wild. Later, Static and Gear get called by Donald Todd, the lead scientist at Genomatech, who is working on making a cure for the Bang Babies. He wishes Aquamaria would be the first test subject, but wants Static's help to convince her. It's rare to see the concept of consent used dutifully here. Static tells Aquamaria that she can return to her family once she is normal, and she agrees. The news of the matter further reaches Hotstreak, who is angered by the situation. Hotstreak secretly gets into the chamber during Aquamaria's treatment and fires the wires, which causes the treatment to fail, and Aquamaria becomes unstable. The design for Aquamarine has changed for the better in this episode, as she looks more like a femme fatale, a watery woman, than the bubbly girl from earlier. A change in voice artist also occurred as Erica Velez was replaced by Yenny Alvarez, causing Aquamaria to stop repeating everything she said in Spanish. Aquamaria leaves the lab through a drain and meets Hotstreak, asking for his help to get revenge. A scared Hotstreak lies through his teeth and keeps his involvement a secret. Aquamaria and Hotstreak kidnap two of the assistant scientists, and Aquamaria also appears at the Dakota High swimming competition, where Dr. Todd's daughter, Tina Todd, is competing with Daisy. Aquamaria kidnaps Dr. Todd before Static and Gear can do anything. In a lab, Hotstreak forces the scientists to put Aquamaria in treatment again, but it doesn't work. However, he mistakenly blurts out about the overload, and Aquamaria realizes that he is responsible for her unstable condition. Losing faith in everyone, Aquamaria tries to drown all of them inside the lab. Static and Gear come in time as Aquamaria escapes. Dr. Todd hands them the last remnant of the antidote, and Gear examines it. He says that giving Aquamaria electric shocks was the wrong move, and that they needed to electrolyze the formula. Static does what is required, and Gear encloses it in a zap cap. Dr. Todd further informs that if Aquamaria absorbs more water, she will be indestructible. Although Dr. Todd makes the first appearance in this episode, he is also mentioned in other ones. Static notes that Aquamaria is probably heading towards the Dakota Lake and later to the sea. Gear remotely accesses the control station and closes the sewers, forcing the furious Aquamaria to flood the streets. Static and Gear charge up the zap cap and throw it at her, temporarily bringing her to a human-like state. At the lab, a solid dose of the formula finally brings Aquamaria to normal, as Dr. Todd hopes he can do the same to all Bang Babies. But if you are wondering if it affected Static or not, don't worry, as Static is still perfectly fine shocking Gear's butt.
Why don't you run a diagnostic to find out just what kind of double-dealing little worm you are?
Kidnapped. The second last episode of Static Shock has tensions running high. It starts with Gear's boots malfunctioning as he flies through the air. Backpack finds a computer worm that caused the incident and returns home to re-update everything. Static goes home, followed by a drone camera that captures him removing his mask. At Alva Industries, Edwin Alva Sr. is amidst a verbal altercation with Dr. Roberts as Alva is unwilling to fund her Project Omni, which uses satellites to gather information. The project aimed to discover Static's identity, but now that Alva's son is back, Alva Sr. has no problems with Static. As Dr. Robert refuses to budge, Alva fires her. After Alva leaves, Dr. Roberts receives an alert, which shows her the footage of Static removing his mask. This moment marks the fourth time any villain has learned of Static's secret identity. However, the issue appears to be a curveball, as Puff and Onyx kidnap Robert Hawkins and almost jeopardize Sharon's life. Static saves Sharon, but that cannot be said about Sharon's car, which gets stuck in a building's window. Sharon shares the news of Robert getting kidnapped, which sends Static on a spree of strangling every criminal Bang Baby in town. He finally learns that Puff and Onyx are the kidnappers, and finds them in an abandoned building. Puff delivers a note stating the address where Robert could be found, but surprise, surprise, it's again a junkyard. Soon, a door opens in the junkyard and Static gets inside. He finds Robert held in a room with trigger sensors. Dr. Roberts comes out of the shadows and introduces herself as Omnara. She shares the video footage of Static and blackmails him into stealing her equipment for Project Omni from Alva Industries. Static wishes to speak to Robert, and to his surprise, Robert declares that he knows Static is his son Virgil. As Robert states his deduction, we wonder how the villains are clueless about why Static is so hyper about Robert Hawkins' kidnapping. Static steals the equipment as ordered, and Alva is thrown off at first, but quickly realizes that Omnara must be behind the act. Edwin Alva is made to wear more business-style attire this season, and although his feelings towards Static change, his personality does not. While setting up the machines, Omnara explains how Project Omni is a global surveillance network that can insert a computer virus anywhere and control any digital device on Earth. Static soon realizes that this is the same virus that affected Gear. However, Omnara noticed that a helmet allowing her to interface with the project is still in the Alva Industries. She uses the surveillance computer and finds that the helmet is in transit in a convoy. Static goes there to steal the helmet, and wonderful melancholic music accompanies the sequence. Gear arrives to stop Static, and the two best friends fight each other. Omnara continuously instructs Static to finish off Gear, making it increasingly difficult for him. Static somehow manages to subdue Gear and calls him a double-crossing worm. Pretending to rebuke him, Static asks Gear to run a diagnostic. Thankfully, Gear gets the clue. Once Omnara gets the helmet, she completely ignores Static's request to release his father and dons the helmet, giving her complete control over the networks. Omnara aims an energy blast towards Static, but Gear arrives and pulls him away. As Gear loads a counter-virus program to stop Omnara, Static goes to save his father. Static levitates his father through the sensor, and the three escape from the lab and onto the streets. Omnara also comes out onto the streets in her terrifying avatar. She launches nuclear missiles at every Alva Industry building, and Alva asks his men to take the helicopter out. Omnara also controls all the vehicles on the street to attack Static and Gear. Robert even saves Static, but Omnara retaliates. However, this time, the counter-virus kicks in, and Omnara's brain gets fried due to the overload, ensuring she won't be able to reveal Static's identity to anyone. Despite promising not to be a superhero again, Static seeks permission from his father, but the three still keep it a secret from Sharon, who is mad since her car insurance doesn't cover Bang Baby incidents.
Watch this!
Power outage. The final episode of Static Shock begins with Sharon inspecting an odor. She gives an earful to Virgil for avoiding the house chores. Robert saves Virgil, who now uses his son's superpowers to repair electrical items. At school, Richie freaks out for getting a B-, while Richie and Virgil get yelled at by Daisy and Frida for disappearing on them. But this is not all. Things will get twisty and worse for our metahumans. An alarm from nearby sends Virgil and Richie on superhero duty. For the first time, Daisy and Frida get an inkling that the duo might be the famed Static and Gear. Nevertheless, Static goes after Kangor while Gear chases Ferret. During the fight, Kanga suddenly starts losing his power as his feet turn normal. Static calls Gear over in panic while Ferret reports the incident to Eben and the metabreed. Ferret also turns into a normal human during the conversation. Meanwhile, Static and Gear take Kanga to the hospital, where Dr. Todd informs them that he has been spraying a Bang Baby cure all over Dakota. Considering this is the last episode, this kind of linear storytelling may sound dull. This is perhaps why the 4th season was not up to the mark as the 3rd one. In spite of this factor, Subway restaurants in the US and Canada released some Static Shock toys on July 4, 2004. Since the retail toy deal could not be secured, these were the only available toys based on the series. Coming back to Dakota, the issue of losing their powers rattles Virgil and Richie. They decided to visit Dr. Todd, and you know who else has decided to meet Todd? The metabreed. As they break into the lab and threaten the scientists, Eben orders Hotstreak to get the canister of Bang Baby gas. Hotstreak doesn't want to follow Eben's orders, and as the two guys argue, Talon tries to seize it, but she turns human. Eben's powers also falter, but he still manages to escape with Shiv and Hotstreak. Static and Gear take Talon to the hospital, who now insists on calling her by her real name, Teresa. She informs that Eben wants to recreate the Big Bang accident. Eben later kidnaps Teresa. Gear also has a problem interpreting the constant data, but still manages to decipher a code stating Bang Babies are in the dock. Eben appears at the dockyard with his real human face and body, so now his powers are exactly like those of his brother Adam. He had rallied several metahumans to reinstate their full powers only if they considered him their leader. Eben has ordered Hotstreak to tie Teresa, who argues that Eben was nobody before the Big Bang. Unlike others, the show has ultimately made Eben the arch-enemy of Static with 0 redeemable qualities. This is quite a downplay on Static's powers, as Eben barely amounts to be a massive threat. Static and Gear arrive and snatch the small can of gas, but are soon caught and confined in a chamber on a ship by Eben, Hotstreak, Boom, Slipstream and Tamara Lawrence's monster form. However, Hotstreak runs away with gas, and Eben finds him through a security camera. The duo fight in a chamber that accidentally blows open the canister. The huge amount of gas makes Eben and Hotstreak monstrous as they fight. On the other hand, Teresa helps Static and Gear escape, who also inhale the gas while finding the rogues. They eventually encounter a monstrous and gigantic Hotstreak and Eben, who are fused together. A final fight ensues, and with Static and Gear's powers back, they fight back. Ebenstreak also creates wormholes to suck in the heroes, but Static throws a gas tank into the wormhole, which causes the ship to blow up, absorbing Ebenstreak. Dwayne McDuffie loathed the idea of the Bang Babies being cured, as it opposed the show's entire premise. McDuffie was unhappy with how the final season was treated. The network pursued this idea, and so Static and Gear's powers were kept intact in a compromise. This was made possible by showing that Gear plans to make a cure to keep his and Static's powers intact. Static also points out that Eben and Hotstreak could be back, and so might other Bang Babies who might have inhaled this new gas. The show ends with Static and Gear flying off into the night, leaving us a bit unsatisfied and yearning for more. As we end recapping this fantastic and memorable series from the early 2000s, we wish there was more of Static Shock to hit our screens. Call it the relatable onliners of Virgil and Richie or the fabulous crossovers. It sure entertained a massive audience and is still worth rewatching. Do you think a reboot of Static Shock could do justice to this one? Do share your opinions in the comments section.